JAKOB.
Hi, this is Luna with Luna Perspective. Today's episode of Luna Perspective will be focusing on Megaman X8, playing the classic series, the X series, fan games, and even ROM hacks. This game is my absolute favorite. I always find myself coming right back to it, which, after a long period of time, led me to wanting to make this video. I want to talk about why X8 is an amazing game, and not only that, why I think it is the best X game in the entire franchise. Let's jump right in. I'm going to assume viewers of this are mostly familiar with the Megaman X series already, but for those who are not up to speed, this section will be as succinct and direct as possible to help you catch up. X is a robot built by Dr. Light originally in the year 20XX, who was sealed away for around 100 years until the year 21XX. Unintentionally, he would be discovered by Dr. Kane, who was simply on his routine survey for ancient fossils of plant life. Dr. Kane discovered through Dr. Light's notes that X was given the ability to think and make his own decisions like that of a human. Further commenting that X seemed more like a man than like a machine. Soon after, X was transported to Kane's lab, where he would work together with X to create the first Reploids. The next generation of robots made in X's image. Just like X, they are able to make their own decisions and act on their own accord. This freedom of choice came at a risk, as not long after, several Reploids would go Maverick, a term to describe machines that have gone against their instructions or have harmed humans. A group of Reploids tasked with taking down Mavericks was soon assembled, labeled the Maverick Hunters. Dr. Kane created his magnum opus robot to help lead the hunters. This robot was named Sigma. X would be accompanied by his companion Zero to help with the hunters' operations. But unbeknownst to X, Zero's origins and his relation to Sigma lingered in the dark. Before Zero had been recruited to join the Maverick Hunters, he was originally found in a buried lab, similar to X. However, Zero was already Maverick. This led to a heavy altercation where Zero nearly killed Sigma, but due to a fault in Zero's programming, he became unable to continue fighting. Sigma took his opportunity, delivering a blow to Zero's core. With that single blow, Zero's memories had been wiped, and the virus that lay within Zero's core had been transferred to Sigma. Even Sigma's powerful antivirus protocols were unable to fully stop the virus. The virus merely adapted and merged with his brain, resulting in a new, much more powerful infection, now known as the Sigma virus. Sigma would soon lose control and go Maverick, taking many of the high-class hunters to his side. One of those hunters being Vile, who had been found to be Maverick and imprisoned, but was broken out to help Sigma in his plans. Sigma's beliefs were that humanity was inferior and was halting the evolution of Reploids. In response, he believed a genocide of all humanity was in order. In the wake of the Hunters losing their commander, Zero was appointed the new commander of the Maverick Hunters. X, Zero, and the Bastion of Reploids would take their stand in the war against Sigma. Throughout the battle, X would discover capsules left by Dr. Light as a precautionary method to aid him should such events unfold, giving him the strength to overcome the high-class hunters who would be taken down one by one, eventually even defeating Vile and Sigma. Peace had been restored and the battle had been won, but Zero was the cost to reach this goal. He used his life to assist X in taking down Vile, sacrificing himself in the process. X stared into the destruction of Sigma's fortress and questioned if the decision to fight was truly the correct one. Unfortunately, he wouldn't have time to ponder such a question, as the next wave of Mavericks would soon encroach on the temporary peace they had. Thank you so much. Sigma's body was destroyed. However, the Sigma virus lived on, carrying his spirit and allowing him to continue to cause havoc in whatever body he inhabited. The war against Sigma carried on, resulting in countless casualties as there was no end to the Maverick epidemic. As the war waged on, Zero would eventually be repaired to return to fighting Sigma. And all the same, Sigma would keep coming back in a new body to reap destruction over and over again. Even Vile would return to attempt to exact his revenge, before being quickly scrapped by X. A group of Reploids known as Repliforce would be labeled as Maverick for staging an attack on Sky Lagoon. However, they had no part in this, as it was the Maverick Magma Dragoon who attacked Sky Lagoon, an ex-hunter who wanted to get back at X. In the wake of these accusations, Repliforce became Reploid separatists who wanted independence from humans and to form a Reploid-only society. They had created a space colony named Final Weapon as to be a symbol of their independence. Final Weapon was equipped with an Earth-decimating laser, said to be built in self-defense. Sigma, who had been pulling the strings and implanting his virus throughout Repliforce, would attempt to use this laser to destroy humanity. X and Zero managed to take down and stop Final Weapon, at the cost of many Reploid lives. The two of them were stuck in thought about if all Reploids will inevitably go Maverick, and maybe even if they will meet the same fate. Several months later, the battle against Mavericks and Sigma would continue to wage on as a new virus created by Sigma would be discovered. Dubbed the Zero virus by the new navigator Alia, this virus was so strong it could alter reality. This virus was created to seek out Zero and to direct him to his original intentions, which was to destroy X. A space colony by the name of Eurasia was infected by the virus and was also able to spread it throughout the world. Eventually, the virus would cause it to go on a collision course towards Earth. Signas, the newly appointed commander of the Maverick Hunters, ordered Zero and X to quickly find and assemble parts to upgrade a laser cannon to destroy or at least weaken the impact of Eurasia. Attempts at fully stopping Eurasia's collision had failed, but they were able to weaken its potential devastation. At the same time, Zero would be unknowingly awoken by the virus, resulting in a deadly clash between Zero and X. As their clash came to its conclusion, Sigma saw an opportunity and tried to destroy X. Zero came to his senses and prevented him from doing his plan. Sigma quickly makes a temporary retreat. The two hunters come back together and prepare to take him down. They discover through Sigma that he knew of Dr. Wily, Zero's creator, but how is not known. These words ultimately change nothing as their final clash still commences. But before Sigma is defeated, he reveals his final trick. An attempt at self-destruction to take both X and Zero down. The explosion left Zero in shambles, and X comes over to Zero's dying body. While he is pleading for Zero not to die, Sigma launches a sneak attack by charging a blast right behind them, piercing both X and Zero. As Zero is about to die, he fires his last shot to destroy Sigma once and for all. Zero lays on the ground, remarking that this outcome is better than him living, saying goodbye to X. Zero dies, X taking his saber and continuing to fight for justice and peace. 2 weeks after the events of X5, a Reploid scientist named Gabe would visit the crash site of Eurasia. There he found what he at first thought was mere debris, but which he discovered was actually a sample of Zero's DNA. He immediately began analyzing it, and after roughly a week of study, he was turned insane by its viral power. With the help of the mysterious Reploid scientist Isaac, he decrypted 99.98% of Zero's DNA, using his new knowledge to create Nightmare and Hymax, along with resurrecting 8 of his deceased subordinates. Mad with power, Gate formed a plan to conquer all Reploids. He dreamed of his own society of advanced Reploids, independent from humanity. All other low-grade Reploids would be brought into submission or exterminated. To accomplish this, Gate created a discolored copy of Zero called the Zero Nightmare, which Isaac publicly blamed as the scapegoat for the Nightmare virus. Isaac encouraged Reploids all over the planet to join Hymax and the 8 Nightmare investigators to hunt the Zero Nightmare before it was too late. In reality, Gate intended for as many Reploids as possible to be exposed to the Nightmare virus, so they could either survive to prove their worth or succumb to the Nightmare and become mindless slaves. When the Maverick hunters destroyed one of Gate's Nightmare investigators, Isaac shared the news. Isaac suggested simply using Hymax to subjugate the world, but Gate insisted on using the Nightmare. He asked Isaac about his search for Zero, allowing him to continue despite having no need for Zero's DNA. Throughout the battle against Gate and Isaac, Zero would come back into the picture, revealing that he had, hid himself away so he could repair himself. Yeah. Once the Maverick Hunters destroyed all 8 of Gate's Nightmare investigators, he personally contracted Hunter Base to invite X and Zero to face him in his secret lab. He believed this would be his opportunity to finally analyze the 2 ancient robots. After they destroyed the Nightmare Mother, Gate finally revealed that Zero's DNA is what he used to cause the nightmare in the first place, and challenged the Hunters to come face to face with him in battle. By the time X and Zero destroyed Hymax, Gate had created a nigh-invincible transformation with golden armor to battle them himself. X and Zero still managed to exploit his own power against him, coming out victorious. Injured and desperate, Gate chose to reveal his trump card, though he regretted doing so. He had partially resurrected Sigma. The incomplete and vengeful Sigma refused to acknowledge Gate's part in his resurrection, killing him instead. After Sigma had been defeated, X salvaged Gate's body from the laboratory, unwilling to leave him there as he used to be Alia's friend. Alia was given the choice of what to do with Gate, repairing him or otherwise. However, her decision was never made clear, and Gate's fate remains unknown. After the Eurasia and Nightmare incidents that left the Earth's surface devastated, Reploids have worked diligently to clean up the world and make it habitable for humans once again, and it's slowly recovering still. However, Maverick crime is on a rise. The Maverick Hunters had weakened when X retired from the front lines, to assume a support role to achieve more peaceful solutions. To take care of the rising crime, the group of vigilantes Red Alert was created under the command of Red. Initially, they only fought against Mavericks, but one day the group changed and began acting strange. One of their key members, Axel, noticed he was being used and goes AWOL. Red sends a giant mechanoloid to take him back, but it is stopped with the help of Zero, and Axel is taken to the Maverick Hunter headquarters. It is revealed that Axel is a prototype of next-generation Reploids, and possesses the ability to copy other Reploids completely. Red quickly contacts them and issues a challenge. He released some of the Mavericks Red Alert had in custody in various locations around the globe, challenging them to see who can defeat more with Axel as the prize. In the end, it is revealed that Sigma is behind the change of Red Alert, having been drawn to Red Alert after realizing Axel's prototype powers. Once again, the Hunters face Sigma and he is defeated. Later, Axel attempts to officially join the Maverick Hunters, even with X's disapproval. Which now brings us to Megaman X8, finally! Now before we can jump completely into the start of X8, there are going to be a few clarifications. The story and experience of this game will be treated as if the playthrough is on hard. There are several moments in this game that do not occur unless you are on higher difficulties. I will say this detracts from the experience and isn't very friendly to people who are making this their first X game, especially if they want to see the full story, as playing on easy mode literally gates you from the final boss and endings of the game, which is a real major dick move from Capcom. Thankfully, in the X collection, if you turn on the assist mode, it doesn't disable the full game experience. But with that out of the way, yes, this analysis will be treating the game as if it was on hard. There are some things in this game that are obviously bad, and don't worry, I'll talk about those in plenty of depth when we get there. With all of that out of the way, let's finally begin the Luna perspective on Megaman X8. The story of Megaman X8 starts sometime after the events of X7. Though not specified, it can be assumed to be years, given that the next generation of Reploids are already in production and technology has progressed significantly. The Maverick issue is still ongoing, and with no true solution available despite any and all attempts in the last few years. Nothing has seemed to fix the issue, and Sigma's presence still lingers in the mind of the many, as there is no telling if there will ever truly be an end to this war against the Mavericks. Humanity decides to seek space and begin work on the JAKOB project, using the newly constructed orbital elevator, JAKOB, to ascend to the moon. Along with this project was the mass production of advanced next-generation Reploids. These Reploids were designed to be able to assist with all ongoing ordeals related to working on the moon. The elevator has high-speed personal transport cars, allowing the Reploids to make quick and safe journey from the moon and back. A constant back and forth of Reploids coming back to the Earth and going to the moon. All in an effort to expand mankind's horizons into space, in hopes of possibly a brighter future away from Mavericks. However, during a routine transport to the moon, one of the carts begins to malfunction, causing them to deviate completely off the assisted rails and plummeting to the Earth below. X, who happened to be around the area doing mundane patrol, was the first to witness the crash site of the cart. What ensued shocked X to his very core.
There has been an accident on board the number 4 descent unit.
This is X. I've encountered an accident while on patrol of the orbital elevator. Dispatch rescue mechanoloids immediately. Huh? Sigma?
protect ourselves from damage during the accident. We had to copy a sturdy Sigma body. We knew Generation Reploids enjoy complete and total immunity to all viruses. So even copying something as dangerous as Sigma provides no risk.
Who are you?
I'm Lumine. I'm the director in charge of the elevator and of the JAKOB project.
Out from the fires of the accident unharmed was Sigma. But before X could fully comprehend what to say, around a dozen other Sigmas exited the cart. Standing in formation while X remained in shock, the group's ranks parted and let one Reploid speak among them. It was the director of the JAKOB project, Lumine. They had survived the crash along with all the Reploids on board. Lumine revealed that these Reploids are in fact not the real Sigma. They are just next generation Reploids using their unique copy ability to mimic his structure and sustain any possible damage from the accident. The Reploids revert to their original structures, proving that they are not Sigma. Lumine further explains that the next generation Reploids have complete immunity to all viruses, allowing them to copy Reploids like Sigma with no risk to their safety at all. X stands there in disbelief at what the next generation Reploids are truly capable of, likely recalling that one of his fellow hunters, Axel, was among the prototypes of this generation. However, as there was no damage sustained from the accident, no rescue squads were needed. X returned back to Hunter Base, but not long after, maybe a few days, several Maverick readings are reported by Alia in the Point Galapagos region. The Galapagos region is near the JAKOB project, specifically Noah's Park. Yeah, I get it. Noah's Ark, Noah's Park. You can draw the parallel. I mean, the game was called Paradise Lost as its subname. It's very obvious what they're hinting at here. Afterwards, X and Axel are sent out. Alia informs them that this new Maverick's patterns are peculiar, and she would like for them to collect data to research its patterns. Alia also informs them that Zero will be on the mission soon. But before we delve further into the story, let's dive into gameplay feel, mechanics, and difficulty. This is part of the video where I slobber all over the game and fangirl over it. Sorry. The game feels fan-freaking-tastic. It's buttery smooth, and the controls are super tight. Dashes and wall jumps feel perfect. They are quick, and let the game keep going at a breakneck pace. In comparison to its predecessors, playing the first 3 X games on the SNES feels very sluggish, especially the first one. 2 and 3 feel a lot better, and each individual game, barring X7, feel like they've gotten more and more closer to perfection when it comes to gameplay feel and movement. Speaking of other perfect things, weapon switching remains as a wonderful staple. Also, quick tangent, sorry. I really wish when Megaman Legacy Collection released, they added a hot swapping of weapons. I know that this was likely just a low-budget collection port to PC, but come on, Capcom, really? Really? You're telling me you can release Mega Man Anniversary Collection with added-in weapon swapping and a whole slew of quality of life additions in 2004, but you can't do that for your PC port in 2015? Okay, tangent over, back to Mega Man X8, sorry. Mechanically, X8 feels its most strongest here with refinement of previously added mechanics in the series, namely, Axel's copy ability. It still doesn't feel like it has reached its full potential, but it does get things a lot better than its original implementation. Well, mechanically. Thankfully, it doesn't take 10 real-life years to charge, and another 10 to kill something with Axel's copy shot. However, the Reploids you can copy in this game are actually really small, and their usefulness really only comes in with getting stage secrets and collectibles. You would never want to turn into a copy Reploid for combat use, because they're all really, really, really bad. It's super disappointing, especially considering that an integral part of the story is about next-generation Reploids. And considering that Axel is a prototype of them, you would expect that maybe his copy ability would be fully fleshed out, that maybe it could feel useful and fun outside of just trying to get secrets. Anyway, I like when Axel swaps to his copy ability. He has this really cool effect going on with his armor. I just think it's a nice little detail. Axel has some major buffs compared to his first iteration in X7, but when you really think about it, anything is better than X7. For example, his hover feels very useful, especially for platforming and stalling in the air during certain segments in the game. Additionally, he can permanently cling to the wall and keep firing without slowly descending downwards like X and Zero. Not only that, they gave Axel one of his most unique attributes next to his copy ability, a dodge roll. Some of you may have just thought to yourself, okay, Luna, but why does it matter? And how is a dodge roll unique? Good question. Anyway, this dodge roll gives Axel invulnerability frames, allowing him an alternate way of avoiding attacks, giving him larger windows to punish enemies, instead of just doing a series of dashes and jumps to avoid an enemy or projectile. This move is also strong enough that it can straight up cheese certain boss moves. Besides, this is one of the very few moves in the entire game that gives you iframes. And if you're unaware, iframes means invincibility frames. And just like every other movement option in the game, it feels genuinely intuitive to use. Plus, it has the added bonus of making you look cool as hell when you're good at using it. Axel's weapons have also seen a massive improvement over X7, giving them a sense of identity and allowing them to stand out compared to X's weapons. Because, let's face it, all of Axel's attacks in X7 could have just been abilities for X. In fact, they just are skills for X. Honestly, the more I look at X7, the more I realize the video game crash should have killed off gaming as a medium. Anyway, Axel's weapons stand out drastically from X this time around, and he also has all his unique guns modeled this time. Some of them look like prettied up versions of weapons he had previously, but given some extra kick. All of his weapons have been designed to adjust with his full aim range, allowing him to fire in any direction. On top of that, he has infinite weapon energy for all of his weapons, except for his copy ability's duration. Axel feels like a fleshed out character mechanically now, and it's amazing to see. He has his own unique attributes that finally help him to stand up to the other hunters in terms of style and strengths. Speaking of other hunters, let's talk about the team system. Back in X7, you could pick another hunter to assist you in the mission, which was a major change that helped create the sense that you were fighting with a team of Maverick hunters, and not always just going on solo missions like in the previous X games. This time around, the system has been given a larger amount of additions to make it feel more intuitive and worthwhile to use. Before we talk about the team systems, let's talk about something really quick. Some people like to criticize the team systems in this game for not letting you play as all three hunters. This is a fair criticism, but when you take into account the major overhaul of the system itself, having 3 hunters might have made the game extremely easy, even on the highest difficulty. The reason lies within the newly introduced mechanics. Whenever one of your characters takes damage, a portion of their HP lost in the attack will still be there shown as red. This red HP will slowly drain over time. However, if you swap to your other hunter, you can actually help your partner recover HP by damaging enemies. Through my digging of information, I couldn't find an official term for this mechanic, so pardon my creative intrusion here, but for the convenience's sake, I will refer to this mechanic as a rally. Oh wow, dodging and a rally system? This game really is the Bloodborne of Mega Man. This mechanic is extremely useful and helps to compensate game difficulty and the lack of consistent power-up drops. As, with proper play, your hunter should have way more HP and should suffer less health loss from mistakes. Along with this system are new additions like Tag Assist. Whenever one of your hunters becomes grabbed or paralyzed, you can swap to your other partner and break them out of the stun, while also swapping to said hunter, meaning you can immediately retaliate and recover some lost HP for your partner who just got grabbed. One of the best additions of the team system lies within the double attack mechanic. Between both hunters' HP bars is something called the attack gauge. As you deal damage and perform combos, this gauge begins to fill up. Combos aren't really a complex thing. It's more just how many times you can hit an enemy without stomping. When this bar is full, you can unleash a powerful move that will damage every enemy on the screen, granted that you actually land at the activation hitbox. Plus, you get this sick animation of your hunters working together to clear out any threat in their way. It's a big addition that helps this honestly feel like a team effort among hunters. Now, landing this does require you to get up close and personal, but the payoff is a very powerful screen clear. Besides, if you are playing Zero or going fast, you are likely going to end up in the face of enemies anyway. They also implemented an amazing quality of life feature with this double attack. If you ever miss, you do not lose the gauge. It just goes on a few second cooldown until you can use it again. So if you do end up missing it, you will not lose the gauge you built up. This attack also functions differently when you're in a boss fight. Instead of being an AoE attack, it functions as a single target burst. This move is most effective used as an execute. Whenever a boss is at the proper health threshold, you'll be able to tell via the effects changes. And a neat little thing that I personally enjoy. When you finish a boss with the execute, both of your hunters will perform their victory poses together on screen. I think this is just a really neat little feature. This attack gauge also serves double functionality. Whenever one of your hunters falls in battle via taking too much damage, and not something instant death related, you can slowly fill up the gauge as you would normally, but instead of getting enough for a double attack, it revives your ally at a small percentage of their maximum HP. Personally, I can't imagine an X game coming out after this, as if we would ever get one, without including some variation of this team system. This revamped team system is something I absolutely adore. It is truly something special, and it really does help the gameplay. Now, back to talking about specific hunters again, since I got the whole team mechanic out of the way. Zero and X don't gain much in this game, aside from obviously new boss weapons and techniques. These are how the hunters have functionally always played throughout the series, and nothing really has been developed. So let's talk about chips. Got you. You think I would forget to talk about Zero's armory of weapons he has access to, didn't you? Well, silly you. You've just been got. Zero back in X7 had access to new weapons after defeating specific bosses, that when you swapped to them, they changed his moveset. Granted, these weapons were downright awful, and were objectively all worse than the Z-Saber, so you would never in your right mind use them. Besides, there were only 2 other weapons to choose from. But here comes Megaman X8, giving Zero 5 extra weapons to collect throughout the game. Only one of these is obtained from defeating a boss, while the rest are found via just stage secrets. In addition to the variety of weapons he has been given, some of his techniques actually change depending on the weapon you're currently wielding. It's an amazing detail they didn't have to add. Let's start with his first weapon on the list here. Zero's Durga Glaive makes a return from X7. However, instead of just being an oversized pool noodle with a knife attached to it, it's one of the strongest and most broken weapons in the game. With the fluidity of movement in combat compared to X7, Zero having a large range weapon actually allows him to dispatch enemies on the screen very quickly, especially in tandem with one of his techniques. You can play the entire game using the D-Glaive and suffer no issues. In fact, it would be harder to play using the original Z-Saber. Now, how does the D-Glaive compare to Zero's other optional weapons? The Basho fans are these really adorable little energy blade fans that also come with this really cute idle animation. It is also deceptively strong. Whenever you are standing still, certain projectiles will just be deflected in an area around you. It's really cool to give Zero access to a weapon, allowing for defensive and reactive play. Later on, after defeating one of the bosses, all of Zero's weapons glow orange and gain the ability to deflect projectiles. But the B fans have a stronger variant of the deflection. Whenever you deflect the projectiles with your attack combo, these can actually be sent back at the opponent and deal damage. The application of this isn't that varied, but it is a nice little bonus to an already nice weapon. Its range is on par with something like the Z-Saber, but in my opinion, it is an overall upgrade to it. The Basho fans have a nice slot in his armory. Another alternate weapon for Zero is the Titan Breaker. This weapon is... Okay, let's try to be positive. T-Breaker does a large amount of damage and instantly breaks the guards of enemies. However, this weapon only has a one-swing combo. Yes, some of Zero's weapons actually have different combo lengths. These are completely independent of Zero's combo upgrades, meaning even if you max out Zero's melee chain string, the hammer will still only do one attack. T-Breaker has a very long end lag, making it pretty terrible at dealing with multiple enemies, especially if they don't die in a single hit. But T-Breaker has a unique variant of a technique that lets Zero do a very powerful quick slam attack. This is mostly delegated to just being an obstacle breaking tool for an item or two, but it can be used in combat for varied amounts of effectiveness. It's not that the unique technique is bad on its own, it's unfortunately tied to a, in my opinion, bad weapon. This weapon has the same reach as the Z-Saber, which is fine, but with how slow this weapon is, it's pretty quickly outclassed by everything else. I'd never recommend using this weapon. You buy it just to increase Zero's power. If you're confused about what the hell power is, we're going to talk about that later. Alright, on to the Kaiser Knuckle. Okay, let's talk about the K-Knuckle. This weapon is extremely polarizing among fans of X8. Its usefulness entirely depends on how good you are at the game, which I think gives it a really bad reputation in comparison to his other weapons. I used to get my ass absolutely beat when trying to use this weapon, but I have to say, despite that, the cool factor alone made it worth it. The K-Knuckle is a pair of fist weapons that have the least range in the game, meaning you need to be almost touching an enemy to hurt them. They do, however, have the same damage as the T-Breaker, with the added bonus of a 2-string combo. Granted, this combo does not crack enemy guard. You would need to use a specific variant technique in order to do so. And since I just mentioned variant techniques, this weapon has the most variants in the game. Zero's technique, Raikosen, changes from a slow dash attack with invulnerability to Raijinken, a quick dashing uppercut that summons lightning. This is one of the coolest attacks Zero ever gets in the entire X series. It looks about as strong as it appears. However, if you're not playing properly, you will just end up missing your target and maybe even take contact damage. This single move takes so much practice to use consistently throughout the game on different enemies. If you do not learn how to properly use this version of the technique, you will just end up hurting yourself and losing. There is a way to shortstop yourself, but getting that down pat and using it fight to fight might be a little difficult. This variant technique alone helps to illustrate how difficult this weapon is to use effectively. Sorry, I can't fawn over this single move all day, so let's carry on. Ratsetsutsun is a technique for Zero, where he performs a large circular spinning slash while in the air. K-Knuckle changes this move to Senpukyaku, which is a much smaller range version, but does larger amounts of damage. It also comes with its own unique effects, which look mesmerizing. Oh yeah, this variant technique is also just a Street Fighter reference, because, well, Capcom. Juhazong is a powerful but slow technique designed to directly hit through enemy guards with a large swing. With the K-Knuckles equipped, this move changes into Ganzana, becoming an almost instant AoE slam. This version no longer goes directly through guard, but instead cracks it. It also does really good damage. Inkojin is an attack that sends Zero straight down with a flaming downward thrust attack. Its usefulness is pretty slim, honestly. Considering the hitbox is really small, along with the slower use time, it's a pretty unsafe move to use in most situations. Even on all the other weapons, it suffers for being slow and small, but when wielding the knuckles, the move is instead Inkukyaku. No longer is it a slow down thrust move, but a diagonal downward kick. It looks cool, but trust me, it doesn't save this technique from being just kind of a bad attack. It's still usable for some fun movement and cool looking finishers, but not much aside from that. Despite all its flaws, Inkukyaku will always be my beloved. But let me tell you, when you finally master this weapon, you'll look like an inhuman machine. Someone did an entire playthrough with this weapon without taking any damage. If you're curious about it, their YouTube channel name is X-Maverick Hunter. The footage in the background isn't theirs, but if you want to watch it, a link will be provided in the description to their channel, and on screen now. There's another weapon Zero can acquire, but only after you've beaten the game with him. I want to save talking about that for later. Now that we've talked about Zero and Axel's repertoire of techniques and skills, we can move on to X's new lineup of gear. There are 2 armor sets that X can collect throughout the game. 3 if you really want to be technical. Actually 4? I'll explain. Like I mentioned, you gain armor parts throughout collecting them in stages, like every other game in the series. But this time around there are two armor sets, the Icarus set and the Hermes set. Icarus set being more aligned to a powerhouse armor, while the Hermes armor is a defensive utility set. They function drastically different from one another. For Icarus, you gain these upgrades: a damage aura around you when you jump. The armor will block 50% of damage, while also letting you have more rally after taking damage. Doubling his jump height, normal buster shorts are already pre-charged, and his fully charged buster will shoot a giant laser shot. This was sick as hell as a kid. I always rocked the Icarus armor because I believed firmly that Hermes just sucked. Well, come to find out, Hermes is actually the most broken armor out of the two here. If you are wearing the Hermes armor, you gain double speed and dashing, along with iframes during your dash. You now have a flat damage reduction, allowing you to just immune weaker attacks in the game. His charge shots become a widespread fire, allowing him to cover a good portion of the screen without the use of boss weapons. Finally, the last piece of the set also doubles his charging speed. On top of these distinctions, when wearing the full set of your choice, you gain a special ability. When you are wearing Icarus, this is the Giga Crash, where it will just let you full clear the screen. Hermes, on the other hand, gets the X Drive. This is a powered up stance that slowly depletes energy. While in X Drive, all of your armor bonuses and effects are doubled, meaning you move even faster, you charge up instantly, and fire a screen-wide volley of charge shots. You take even less damage to the point where you can pretty much invuln everything in the game. Plus, this ability regenerates energy pretty fast compared to the Giga Crash, allowing you to spam it pretty frequently. Hermes is broken because you are functionally immortal, while also being able to speedrun everything and instantly clear the screen. Now, if you don't like one set or the other, then here's a good thing for you. You can mix and match these parts, meaning you can have 3 Icarus parts with 1 Hermes, and vice versa. This doesn't really benefit you, and you'll likely only be doing this out of coincidence, as mixing and matching your armor does not grant you either the X Drive or the Giga Crash. I mentioned earlier there are 4 armors in total. The third and first full set you get is the neutral armor. It's visually the same as the other armors, just without the glowing lights based on what option you slot it in. In terms of function, it has none. It's basically just a costume. It provides no change to gameplay, and you would never pick this unless you just wanted to look cool, which I'm fine with. I think the neutral armor has a very unique look among all of X's other armors in the series. As for how X gains all of these armors is through capsules left by Dr. Light. You know, the typical shebang. You really gotta wonder how much time it took to make all these armors, and just happened to place them coincidentally, where X will end up in a future around 100 years later. Like Dr. Light's hindsight being 2020, we're going to cut that tangent there and move on to chips. Chips are what replace character upgrades in this game. You don't find heart tanks or energy tanks anymore. Now what you do is find rare metals hidden in stages, usually requiring a specific tool to acquire. When you bring in rare metals, they become identified, and the upgrade can now be bought with metals. If you remember bolts from the classic series, it's essentially just that. Replace the words bolt and metal, and they're the same thing. They're all around the stages and drop from enemies. These are used to buy things, like we mentioned before, identified rare metals. You find your life tanks, energy, and weapon tanks through discovering rare metals now, meaning between each individual level, you are likely having to figure out which of your hunters you want to upgrade, budgeting your metals on resources and permanent upgrades. There's a large section of upgrades that can be bought without the discovery of rare metals, but these are usually just flat stat gains, like damage, Zero's combo length, and health. Rare metals are also how Zero gets most of his weapons. You will not be able to purchase all the upgrades in a single playthrough, well, unless you grind. But thankfully when you New Game Plus, you keep all of your already purchased gear. You can get all of the upgrades in a single run, assuming you spend hours grinding for metals. There is, however, a specific glitch that sets your metals to the maximum amount possible. But you can just look that up, as talking about glitches in this video isn't part of the script. I know some people dislike the system of powering up characters. It's drastically different from how the other entries in the series went about it. But in my opinion, the game might have been too easy if you could have bought all the upgrades in a single playthrough. Part of me feels the challenge is powering up your roster and getting the upgrades you want in whatever order, using what you have left over for things like filling up your weapon and energy tanks, getting spike protection, and even your retry chips. Oh boy, I get to talk about retry chips. Retry chips are one of the biggest issues people take with this game. They are your extra lives. However, Unlike the previous games where you could just pick up an extra life and it would be added to your maximum, in this game, depending on your difficulty, you get infinite, 5, and 3. When these chips run out, it's game over, and you go back to R&D lab. You will also need to spend medals to buy retry chips. Personally, retry chips definitely feel weird. I don't think they needed to be implemented as a shop item, nor do I think the amount you can have should coincide with your chosen difficulty. It's just a really odd change that makes the game more frustrating than enjoyable. When you game over, you have to refill all of them. While they're inexpensive, it is just a monotonous, unneeded step that keeps you segmented from the gameplay. And if you forget to fill up on your revive chips after clearing a stage, and you die at the boss, well, sorry buddy, it's back to square one for you. Honestly, I've tried to think of ways to defend this, and I genuinely don't think there's a logical reason to defend the system of extra lives. It's just poorly implemented, and doesn't add much to the gameplay. If retry chips could rarely drop from enemies, then I would have no problem with this system. But alas, they don't, and it's just so mind-boggling to me. There is one more thing I want to talk about while we're in this section, and that's difficulty. This game is very harsh. You start the game extremely fragile, and even with maximum health upgrades, it's completely possible to just die within a few seconds from misplaying. If you're going through this for the first time, you have to be very patient and cautious with how you traverse levels, because you will get your ass kicked faster than you can say, "I wish Capcom would make Mega Man X9. Oh yeah. Bosses in this game have second phases with new patterns. Others even have third phases. During these different phases, bosses will use their strongest attacks, while most of the time having complete invulnerability. You can tell a boss has gone into their second phase by the sudden music change and the sound of them powering up. This signifies that the boss has gone into overdrive mode, unleashing very deadly attacks that can quickly destroy you. There's something I love a lot, because it makes the bosses stand out so much more, while also giving them protection from what some people call spark mandrill syndrome, where some bosses just get folded like a piece of paper when you're using their weakness. Granted, it can still happen in this game, but at least you have to contend with the boss and don't instantly win. Personally, I believe overdrive attacks and overdrive phases are a welcome addition. It's very fun and provides a good amount of challenge. And with that, I think we've covered everything I want to talk about in this section. Now, let's move back to the intro stage and how it makes me feel, cause goodness, do I have a lot of love for it. Some of the best aspects of the Mega Man X games lie in their intro stages. Intro stages are designed beautifully. They get you hyped while teaching you a few things about the game. Mega Man X8 is pretty high up there in terms of intro stages, as it teaches you most of the mechanics you will need to know for the upcoming experience. From the basic movement controls, to learning about double attacks, swapping hunters, and guard. Already from the start of the game, you are introduced to Axel and X as your initial characters, traversing and battling through a small gauntlet of enemies that help you to understand the best ways to clear them out as each individual. Eventually, coming across the main boss of the intro stage. This mechanoid is the first gate that blocks you from continuing forward. The boss has multiple weak points that need to be shot before it can be damaged. Throughout this small engagement, it's very likely you'll get grabbed. The game has already given you precursor knowledge that if someone gets grabbed, swap and save them. This segment isn't too terribly difficult. In fact, it's pretty lenient with the player. When the baddie gets too damaged, he flocks away, and now you, as the player, have to say farewell to X for the time being, as Axel takes the spotlight. This portion is longer than the previous one, this time without another hunter to rely on. One issue I have with the intro stage is that there is nothing that helps you to understand how Axel's copy shot works, nor does it teach you any applicable ways to use it. Granted, the entire game shafts Axel's copy ability potential. Giving Axel at least one scenario where he has to use it to progress would have been a really nice touch. Even just to gain an optional item, it would have been great. But that's realistically the only gripe I have with the intro stage. So let's continue talking about what I enjoy in this stage. Oh my gosh, the music is so fun and gives great vibes to an intro stage. The environment is also beautiful. Noah's Park is such a unique stage in the Megaman X series from all points visually, musically, and thematically. No major disaster is occurring. It's just the hunters on a mission to stamp out a mechanoid on the loose. The energy here from the start is awesome and empowering. It always gets me fired up to play the rest of the game. As you continue through, Axel meets up with Zero, and they're met with the second encounter of the rampaging mechanoid. This time around, the game wants to teach you about finding opportunities to deal damage and learning about the double attack. After successfully doing so, the boss will just run away, yet again. This time, Axel departs, leaving you with just Zero to tread forward with. You've been stripped down to the basics of a Z-Saber, and you better learn how to make it work quick. One of the first enemies the game teaches you to fight with Zero are enemies with guard. Simply completing the Z-Saber combo string will break this guard, allowing you to do damage to the target. This section is pretty easy. There's a small corridor that teaches you how to deal with multiple enemies at a time, and a very small mechanic that doesn't really get used in X8 to its fullest potential. That being Mame Q pairing. Now you might be asking, Luna, what the fuck is Mame Q pairing? Well, you see these little guys. These little guys are known as Multi-Attachment Mechanical Engine, Type Q, or, if you have a lick of sanity to you, Mame Q for short. Megaman X8 uses these enemies a lot throughout the game, and they're these, at least what I presume to be, next-generation mechanoids. They're pretty cute, all things considering, and on top of being cute, they have multi-purpose designs and are able to be fitted for most tasks. One of the things they're able to do is symbiotically combine with any mechanoids and make them far stronger. This trait really only applies to the non-variant Mame Qs. Now, I could go on a long tangent talking about all these little guys and their variants. In fact, I did, believe me. I wrote it, realized it was too long, so I cut it from the script. So we're just going to give these cute little guys a mention here, because I love them. Silly boys. Zero makes his way along to the latter half of the stage, where X and him finally meet up. The classic Maverick Hunter duo is in your hands again. This section is the hardest part of the stage, combining your understanding of guard with some platforming trials, as we come face to face with the mechanoid for the last time. For this version of the fight, you just need to break its guard and deliver damage to its weak point. Let's be honest, this boss fight is laughably easy if you just stand there as Zero and mash the combo button, which is fine. This boss isn't really worth it outside of being a simple tutorial for mechanic, so it's fine for it to be easy. And with that, the Krabby Boy goes down, and our hunters successfully clear the intro stage. Overall, I'd say the intro stage absolutely fulfills its need to get the player psyched and adjusted to how the rest of the game will play. I think the music is a fantastic appetizer as well for what's to come. But now that the intro stage is done, what comes next is a story beat. The hunters take down the rogue mechanoid, and with no breathing room after their victory, a rain of missiles bombard the hunters, barely getting out of the way in time.
How nice to see you again, X.
Vile!
He used to be a Class A hunter, but now he's our sworn enemy. He's a maverick and a wanted criminal.
I'd love to stay and play, boys, but I'm afraid I have too much work to do.
When the smoke clears, the hunters see that Vile was the one who attempted to kill them in the missile storm. Somehow, despite having been destroyed by X years ago, Vile has returned from the grave. Axel is left in confusion as he had never seen or heard of Vile before. Zero informs Axel just who they're dealing with. Vile taunts the hunters and shows that he has the director of the JAKOB project, Lumine, in his capture, declaring that Vile now has control over the orbital elevator. Regarding that, a new world will be born. Axel, X, and Zero return to Hunter Base, informing Alia of what transpired, hypothesizing what they could possibly be planning with the capture of Lumine. Before any conclusion or theories can be discerned, their conversations are cut by an alert reporting massive amounts of Maverick readings across many different regions. The talking will have to wait as X, Zero, and Axel need to sort out these new Mavericks. But before dispatching out, Alia introduces the team to their new navigators, Lair and Pallet. Lair's specialty is in identifying enemy abilities and strategy, while Palette specializes in area layouts and possible routes. She also works in the R&D lab, developing chips to assist the hunters. And so, the hunter's journey begins again, like it always does, being tasked with taking down 8 Mavericks and uncovering what exactly is going on. I want to talk a bit about said Mavericks before continuing with talking about their stages and such. Maverick designs throughout the series have always been fantastic. Even in the worst X games, the Maverick design still feels so unique and creative. Well, except that one. Very rarely does a Maverick design in the series go into middling territory. They've been consistent absolutely throughout the series. X8 features some of my favorite Maverick designs as well. Let's rate them one by one. But not in a boring way, only in the kind of way I could come up with. It's time for the Maverick Fashion Show. Hi, this is your hostess Luna, and today we'll be going through the 8 Mavericks of X8. I'll judge them each fairly, to the best of my ability, and we will go through them alphabetically. Our first contestant is
Avalanche Yeti.
I have to say, he has a fun little design. I adore what he has going on with his little ear thingies. He also has a carrot nose and a little snowman face on his chest. It's so adorable for how imposing he's supposed to be. Moveset-wise, he's also pretty sick. Several of his moves are a bit of trouble in the early game to avoid, alongside with the fact he can just freeze you. He has this really awesome burrow ability where he breaks out, doing a Hyoryusho. Hyoryusho? It's Hyoryusho. His voice in the English dub is a little generic and kinda flat, same with his Japanese VA. It just kinda sounds like a guy talking. His Japanese voice actor was Yoichi Sasayama. Let's see what other work he has done. Oh, well maybe his English VA has a larger line of work behind him. Let's see. What the hell do you mean this guy was in My Little Pony and Gundam? Okay, a little off track. Let's assess Avalanche Yeti's design. Final rating. Drum roll, please. He's a really neat design with some cute attributes, but most of what ranked him this high lies in his moveset. Overall, a really good one, but could have been way better. Next up we have
Bamboo Pandemonium.
Bamboo Pandemonium. Ah yes, my beloved panda philosopher. Bamboo Pandemonium. This design is truly up there with some of my favorites. He's just a giant robot panda with giant death blades, and he shoots missiles. Look at his paws. Look at his paws. Ahem. His design truly stands out among all the other Mavericks, especially all these cool symbols he has around his chest. He's extremely tall as well, easily standing over you, the player, even if you're inside the ride armor. This Maverick is a true Goliath. Outside of how he looks visually, he has a striking voice and personality. He's very calm and stable in conversation. Not a hint of emotions really lie in his voice outside of just being content. He also just doesn't come off as someone immediately evil. In his eyes, he believes, truly, that the destruction of this world is just and is a good overall outcome. A better world may be awoken from the scrap of the last one. He believes it was destined to be this way because of the innately destructive tendencies of humans from the very beginning of their development, which, sheesh, what a way with words he has. I could listen to him all day. But, you know, I can't because we need to continue on with the show. The moveset he possesses is very in your face, summoning giant bamboo shafts that can damage you when they grow, to shooting missiles and bombs, grabs, and flurries of claw strikes. He even boasts the second most powerful move in the game, the Yodanatsu, or leaf-severing thrust. This attack is a slow, wind-up punch that will instantly kill you. He is a very powerful Maverick that can be extremely difficult to fight, even with the weakness, as all it takes is one mistake and you die within a second from his flurry of blows, or instantly from his punch. And that's about wraps for Bamboo. So let's get on to the rating. Gosh, I truly am attached to Bamboo's design. He stands out as one of the series' best Maverick designs visually and gameplay-wise. His lines with Axel feel a little half-baked, but despite that, he has a fantastic design, and I love him with all my Reploid heart. Bamboo, my beloved. Next up we have...
Burn Rooster.
As his name suggests, is a fire-type Maverick with a design inspired by a cock chicken. His design is pretty broad and doesn't hide a lot of details for wonder. It's just blatant. A flaming mohawk atop his head, along with these mechanical, I assume to be canisters full of fuel that are to represent the waddle a chicken has. Outside of this unique aspect, you could probably copy-paste his body and make another run-of-the-mill fire-type Maverick. Nothing really is of note besides, I guess, his legs, which stand out, but they are a very tame part of his design. He does have this little heat gauge belt, but it just kind of looks gaudy on his design. Other than that, he fights like a less cool Magma Dragoon. That is, until he reaches his second phase, where he begins shifting the platform you and him fight on. Along with creating 2 fire pillars, this can lead to a very claustrophobic space to fight him in, where there is barely any spots where you are safe. This is something I actually really love about his fight. It can be insanely difficult, especially near the end if the platforms shift a specific way, giving you no breathing room as his kicks bounce him off the tight walls at hyperspeed, burning trails across the ground. He is a very intense Maverick to fight. Another aspect that really saves this Maverick from being a redundant design. Burn and Bamboo actually share the same VA, if you can believe it. And let me tell you, it's a night and day difference between these 2 emotions. This guy, personally, I think his VA has a really large vocal range. Burn Rooster has this spiteful and angry attitude to his voice that's absolutely perfect for a rebellious hothead. This leads my final scoring of... While I do like his personality and his moveset, his design could have been given a lot more work to stand out, aside from his head. The heat gauge belt honestly just feels tacked on and doesn't really add anything. You want to know why I think that? Because in the 20 plus times I've played this game, I have never noticed that it's supposed to be a heat gauge until I looked at the concept art. But to reiterate, Burn Rooster's voice actor and aggression is what I love to see in a Maverick design. It saves a visually redundant design and makes it stand on its own 2 legs. If there's another thing going for Burn Rooster, he isn't the worst fire-type Maverick in the series. That reward goes to... Oh, we're back. We're back on the air. Okay, so, next Maverick on the list is...
Dark Mantis.
Whew, where do I begin? Seriously, where do I begin? I think Dark Mantis is peak when it comes to Maverick designs. He has an amazing palette with a subtle greenish silver to his blades. His sleek and sharp design conveys his lethality and danger so well. I also love his wings. They have this grid-like pattern that almost looks like colored glass. Every part of his design stands out. From his head to his toes, he is unique. I really like how he has these fake mantis eyes coming out of the top of his head, but his real face is below that. I also really enjoyed his blade arms. They look stylish as all hell. Despite clearly standing way over you, he has this near hunch-like stance. His personality strikes me as one of the most real and well-designed Mavericks in the series, alongside Bamboo. While many of them are as thin as paper, Dark Mantis and Bamboo have a character to them that is palpable. Within his dialogue, it's obvious Dark Mantis has his own beliefs on what is morally good or evil, even calling into question on if X is truly in control of his actions, or if he's just perpetuating a projected idea of justice from his creator. To him, X is not fighting for justice. He is a puppet enforcing the status quo of what is conceived as good. This alone just makes me get lost in characters like Dark Mantis. He is doing what is best, even if that means helping and destroying the very set of rules the world is currently built on to make a new one. Going into his moveset, he is extremely fast, hopping around and jumping from wall to wall. He is quick, lithe, and deadly. He has this really quick little dash that if he grabs you, he will start draining your life. Along with throwing his black arrows and shadow runners, they zone out parts of the room, allowing him to get close and personal, which is exactly where you don't want him. He tries to evade you and put you into a corner where he can jump you and kill you. Reaching his overdrive phase, he will leap into the air, creating giant lasers with his blades, cleaving across half the boss room with each swing. Once this move is over, his blades will glow with this bright purple aura and be larger for the rest of the fight. I adore his moveset. Not only is it fun to fight, it is also decently challenging without him becoming unfair. Backing away from talking about attacks, I want to talk about other things I love about him. His personality. He has this slightly southern accent to his voice with a subtle gravel. He comes off as a cold-blooded killer, and not in a pretentious way. In the very real, I will put you in the dirt and forget about you kind of way. It honestly is so hot. Speaking of his voice, his Japanese voice sounds really cool and still retains the same fuck with me and find out attitude. Dark Mantis definitely has to be one of my favorite Mavericks ever. So let's move on to the rating. What Dark Mantis brings to the lineup of Mavericks in the series is a truly unique character that clearly had a ton of love and care put into him, unlike other characters, who we will get to very, very soon. Well, we've already hit the top of the mountain, and all we can see now from here is the metaphorical pit.
Earth Rock Trilobite. What the fuck?
And where better than a pit to find Earth Rock Trilobite? This guy is, well, he's definitely just a scrungly annoying dude who sounds like you can take his lunch money. He's all high and mighty, but as soon as you hit him with something, he's like... His dialogue mostly just consists of him lowballing the hunters and talking about how essential the minerals he's mining are, but he has nothing really sticking around for personality. He's just annoying. Visually, I think his design is alright, but for a trilobite, I feel like they could have gone a little further. I will give him the benefit of being one of the few Mavericks with tiny stature, and being a more unique animal. But aside from that, there's just nothing that truly stands out for him. And he's just an annoying, visually middling Maverick. Like, look at him, he's all brown. The crystal walls are interesting, and that's about where all my praises go for his attacks. These bouncing ball projectiles will almost never hit you as long as you are awake in your seat. And he has this little ground skitter, but this is less of an attack and more just a thing he does. But if you come here after beating Gravity Antonian, Zero Sword kind of just turns him into mincemeat. His wall wave attack is really cool, and honestly is a challenging attack to properly evade, especially in your first few attempts against it. It does a lot of damage as well if you get crushed by them, but the attack drags on for a little too long, and it really makes the fight longer than it should. Oh yeah, another thing, did you know that this guy also voices Dr. Light in this game? Yeah, it's crazy. I never knew until I looked it up for this video. With that, let's get to the rating. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's definitely far from the best. A boss with a few cool factors that gets drowned out by just being kinda lame. It's really unfortunate, believe me. It doesn't really get much better after this aside from one, but we'll get to him soon enough. Next up we have...
Gigavolt Manowar.
Now, I have to clarify, this section isn't talking about stages, or lack thereof, but this specifically is about boss visual design, personality, and movesets. So please, keep that in mind while we talk about Gigavolt. Gigavolt looks really silly, and I love the almost UFO-like design he has. It's cute, but he also is very loud visually. Like, holy. This is a visual noise complaint. He's got these electric thingies, these glowy bits and baubles, all of this. And honestly, it's a little much, but I do enjoy a silly appearance. Now, let's talk about that personality my wonderful Jelly Boy has. He sounds like a 13-year-old nerd with a stuff-up nose. Again, another guy who you could bully for their lunch money. He's like an innocent child, unaware of what's going on. In Gigabolt's head, his understanding is that his actions are not Maverick, nor are they wrong. All he is doing is trying to help make a better new world, and all that requires is the power of the city of Megalopolis. In one conversation, he doesn't even seem to recognize what a Maverick is. Nothing the hunters can say reaches him or causes him to think twice about what he's doing. He just reasserts that he can't be doing anything wrong, and that he is in full control of himself and his actions. For that to be coming out of a nasally sounding little guy like this, it's a little surprising. But what's even more surprising is the shit this guy says during the fight. Every time he attacks, he'll say something like, which, while very funny, also somewhat translates to his Japanese lines.
Get up here! It's a tour! Nowhere on loose! Let's party!
It's so silly. And in all honesty, he has a soft spot in my heart for how goofy he is. But objectively, like, what is this? Why is this? I don't know. I don't even think Gigabolt knows. I don't even think Capcom knows. Anyways, before we get too sidetracked, let's talk about his moveset. The first move he has is Psychic Damage. Massive Psychic Damage. Did you know Gigabolt Manowar shares a voice actor with Alia in X8? Well, if you didn't know before, you do now. Anyways, as far as attacks, Gigabolt uses a combination of dashes and summoning these little jellies with electric shocks. He also can hook his arms into the ground, creating a space you are forced to fight in and try to dispatch some of the jellies, which will also come together to create a giant one. But I think one of his coolest moves is his Thunder Dancer attack. These massive and very deadly shockwaves come out in quick succession, displaying for a brief moment where they will materialize before suddenly appearing. This can and will kill you pretty fast. Overall, he has a fun and active moveset, but outside of learning Thunder Dancer, he's extremely easy to kill. You're more likely, in my opinion, to die from falling off the map than him nuking you down. So let's be honest about this rating. I didn't commission a shrug emote, so just imagine me shrugging here. He's okay. Nothing really wrong with him outside of a weird choice of attack voice lines, and with a very loud design that's nonsensical. He really looks just, for a lack of a better word, stupid. I love this silly goober. But not your stage, Jesus Christ. Who thought that stage was okay?
Gravity Antonian.
Gravity Antonian is a Maverick specialized in anti-gravity efforts and research. Antonian's appearance is much like you'd expect, an ant, but with cartoonishly large mandibles and abdomen. I'm not a bug expert, but I'm pretty sure that's the abdomen. He also has these really cute drill antennae that I love. Similar to Dark Mantis, he also has these fake bug eye lights on his head, while his real face is below. He loathes being praised or given a moniker denoting what he is. He despises having his boots licked or his morals summed up with a broad term. He firmly believes anyone who can't comprehend him or his master's plans needs to be eliminated. He poses the question to the hunters if they believe their actions are as correct as they think they are, if not even just that, but if the world itself is evil and must be destroyed and rebuilt. His style of fighting is something that can throw you a curveball at first. With his anti-gravity abilities, he can rotate and flip the stage, pretty quick too, summoning massive cubes and black holes. These cubes will crush you and can be used to climb onto. The black holes, or as it's referred to in-game, squeeze bombs. These don't do damage, but cover massive portions of the stage and absorbing projectiles, making it difficult to hit him without getting up close and personal. Whenever he rotates the stage, these blocks will also flip and move accordingly. If you are not careful, these blocks will kill you. He also has a spit attack that traps you, requiring a character switch. Keep in mind, he can also attack while walking along walls and ceilings. In his second phase, he causes it to rain massive amounts of cubes that shatter upon hitting the ground. These thankfully are not instant kills. Eventually, he burrows under the ground and picks up a cube from beneath and chucks it at you. This entire moveset is a fun and challenging design that doesn't come across as too easy or too hard. It reaches a really good middle point, requiring you to always be on the move and paying attention to what he does. He lacks very few flaws. Overall, a really solid boss. And genuinely, a solid gravity-based boss, no less. So let's see that rating.
Irregular.
Truthfully, I love his character. If I had to make a tier list of Mavericks, I'd definitely rank him way up there. A really solid character that after countless replays, I love to fight again and again. I've never dreaded fighting against him. Genuinely another great Maverick. Now on to the next contestant.
Optic Sunflower.
We are approaching the finale, folks, so here we go with Optic Sunflower. I hope you have enjoyed the Maverick fashion show. Optic manages the Troya-based training facility, which funnily enough is canonically in Europe. British people joke. Optic already has a few nice things going for him. Yes, him. Growing up, I thought Optic Sunflower was a woman, but I guess I couldn't comprehend the majestique style of a quirked up Maverick. Optic is one of the few plant-based Maverick designs in the entire series. Along with that, he sports a very petite and lanky physique, with references to his namesake all across his design. His hands look like sunflowers, and his fingers also look like petals. Optic's head is of course a flower, but connected to the chest via tube-like attachment. Palette-wise, it's a very nice series of greens and yellows that creates a subtle but gorgeous design. His voice it's odd. It definitely stands out, and I won't say it's grating, but it is a monotone voice with a weird high pitch to it. It's oppressively monotone. He also seems to be a little out of it. His voice lines in conversation are very similar, and don't change much from character to character, always opening and closing with the same lines with barely any varied input, which takes away a lot of personality this Maverick could have had. Optic really only has personality in his attack lines, where he laughs maniacally. He can change the layout of his boss room, which is a bit of a common theme among all the other Mavericks, but each one does it in their own unique way. Optic is no different, but instead of leveling the ground or altering gravity, he alters the placements of structures that appear in the middle of the arena, using lasers he fires from his head that will need to be blocked via a summoned wall. These lasers are extremely hard to dodge at times and move very fast. You'd pretty much need to hide behind one of these generated walls, or you will get zapped. Much like Antonian, he has a projectile that paralyzes you and shifts your position. This one, however, lingers for quite a while and ricochets off the walls, making it in tandem with the lasers and the shifting platforms difficult to manage. Not enough that it's impossible, just challenging and usually requiring a character to swap to break them out. Optic also teleports around the arena, manifesting a fake version of himself to falsely lure you away from the real version. Phase 2 is where things get a little interesting. Along with more frequent lasers and arena swapping, he summons down a giant beam that requires a last-moment dash to evade. This can catch you if you aren't patient and will do a very lethal amount of damage. This boss fight is hectic, and get a bit claustrophobic if you're trying to evade everything. Personally, I consider it one of the harder fights in the game. It's definitely a struggle to deal with, even after replaying the game a lot. Now for the final rating of the final contestant. It's a pretty nice design, but it's coupled with a at best mediocre and at worst annoying voice. He has a strong moveset that requires you to quickly change position and always be aware. I'd like to rate him higher, but honestly, he gets a few points up for being a fun design, but it feels lacking, and they should have reconsidered the personality they gave him. Truth be told, it doesn't really fit him. This partially crazy quirk in his dialogue also isn't as endearing as Gigabolt's, and is just kind of lackluster. Well, that's the end of today's Maverick fashion show. Now on to the next section. Now that we've transitioned away from Maverick designs, I still want to talk about character visuals here for a moment. I will do this as quickly as possible, but I do want to talk about the navigators and the hunters' designs. Aelia visually has changed a lot compared to her first iteration and her last appearance in X7, now sporting longer hair and I'm gonna be honest, I miss short hair Aelia, but long hair Aelia is cute too. The voice they gave her in this game is good as well. I could just gush about her all day. Lair is one of the new characters introduced in X8, alongside Palette. She has a really gorgeous and unique design outside of, oh, Jesus. What was the ESRB rating of this game again? Anyways, I love her hair. It's so pretty. I think it's really cute how it almost always obscures her eyes. She also has this surprisingly deep voice as well, and as sultry as it sounds, she still preserves a very professional cadence to her speaking patterns. Unless, of course, Zero is around. Then she's just a bumbling romantic. Palette is one that I don't think gets nearly as much attention as the other navigators. I think she's fun, and she has a cute design overall. It's really adorable. Though, her X8 renders aren't always showing her in a good expression. The thing she has going on with her headpiece is a bit odd, but it's something that's grown on me in time. The hunters see no real visual changes. If there are any, they're so slight they barely make a difference. Zero, X, and Axel look about the same as they did in X7, just with some minute visual polishing from being put in a better game. So there's nothing much to say other than I love all of their designs. Over the years, I used to be an Axel hater. I think I've joined the Axel fan club though after my 20th plus playthrough. I'm just being honest, I think he looks sick as hell. Younger me was so stupid. But yeah, that's that. Thank goodness that didn't take so long. And if you're wondering about Signas, I mean, he's there, but he's just your score screen guy. He's just a pair of shoulders and a head. So I guess that's cool. He exists. Now, it's time for probably the longest section in the video. At least I anticipate it to be. I'm going to be talking about each individual stage and comb through them meticulously while discussing them and their music. I'll also be including updates to the ongoing story between each stage. Hope you got your popcorn ready, because this is gonna be a long one. How many minutes are we into the video? Oh my god. Last we left off, Vile had captured the leader of the JAKOB project, Lumine, declaring that a new world will be born. The hunters and navigators proposed theories as to what exactly they plan to enact with the elevator and the current situation, but their discussion is halted short by Maverick signals. Hunter Base quickly dispatches navigators on the ready. Our first stop is Megalopolis, Gigabolt Manowar stage. And what a stage to start with, if you can even really call it that. Gigabolt's stage is just an on-rails bike level where you need to avoid obstacles and shoot at him within a time limit or it's game over. This stage, while visually unique, is just terrible, and on replays it's even worse. The entire stage's completion time, including the fight with Gigabolt, can be under a minute if you're fast enough. It's just really crappy, and it's honestly one of the worst experiences in the game. Not only that, Gigabolt will continue to outpace you if you get hit by an obstacle, making the shots from your vehicle not even come close. If you are losing speed, the only option you have to catch up is boosting. However, boosting takes energy, and you need to pick up these energy orbs to get more boosts. Unfortunately, these are usually in places that are near collisions with obstacles or bombs that Gigabolt is dropping. This is a poorly designed stage that isn't even fun when played perfectly. It's not fun at all. The stage's theme is okay, surprisingly. They put more effort into that than the entire level. It's not going in the playlist of tracks I listen to from the series, but it's not awful, and that's something I can give X8 a lot of credit for having, which is just having an all-around amazing and solid soundtrack. After dealing enough damage, we finally wound Gigabolt and we transition to his boss fight. With the task at hand completed, we leave the stage, Gigabolt down, and the next story beat up ahead. Returning to base, X vents his frustration loud and clear. Alia is bewildered and doesn't quite understand why X is upset, talking about the endless struggle between good and evil, the endless war against Mavericks. Axel, on the other hand, doesn't really get where X is coming from. For him, he's ready to fight and return the world to peace. X realizes through Axel's tenacity that he needs to fight, that every moment spent in sorrow about the war is more time letting it go on, more people getting hurt, more destruction being wrought, giving X the second wind he needed to continue fighting. This is a plot point done in 30 seconds that X7 took for half the game. Next on the block is Inferno, Burn Rooster's stage. Inferno is a waste disposal facility with its infrastructure constructed around the inside of a volcano. Now we're on to a real stage, thankfully. Inferno opens up with a descending vertical scroll section, where you must traverse a series of platforms as the screen scrolls quickly downward. This section doesn't give you a large amount of time to breathe, as you're thrust into a high-paced situation. If you're not careful, you will fall to your untimely death. After a few moments, the descension stops, and we're on to our standard level layout, before coming across the mid-stage event door, requiring you to defeat waves of hot miming queues before getting access to the rest of the stage. No, really, that's what they're called. This next section is littered with spikes. Among its pipe design, the platforming here is really tight. Even after landing on several platforms, there are enemies armed with freezing weapons and enemies surfing along the ground. Be very careful when dropping, as you will accelerate to terminal velocity and hit a bed of spikes before you can blink. Now, we enter another event door, where we will need to defeat more waves of MAMEQs. Once we're through with that, it's on to another descending section with screen scroll. This time, it's putting your platforming abilities further to the test, dealing with more enemies and more complex platform layouts. You also have to contend with these explosive crates that will detonate upon being attacked and will tick down after being touched. The stage eventually ends in a funneled section down into Burn Rooster's boss room. I haven't talked about the music just yet, so while we're almost done with this stage, I want to mention that this music kicks so much ass. This stage's theme absolutely rocks, and I've re-listened to it so much. Give it a listen. It's so good. With Inferno cleared, that takes us. It's not over actually. After defeating Burn Rooster, we go into this escape sequence. The magma begins to rise, requiring us to hightail it out of there as fast as possible. So this is the final section of the level, an ascension of climbing platforms. Thank goodness this section doesn't have any enemies. It's just a really tight platforming section you need to be patient on. I really do enjoy the stage, even if on replays the scrolling sections do tend to get a bit monotonous. Though I will give it props for ending a stage in a unique event, and not just the usual Maverick down, leave. And with that, Inferno is cleared, taking us to Hunter Base, where a character developing conversation occurs between Zero, Lair, and Palin. This scene doesn't really provide much in terms of story progression, and is more so just a silly scene, showing how more human these characters are. It's a really nice little world-building cutscene. You have to wonder how the hunters are off-duty. One little information is given out is that Lair is unable to discern Luminate's location. But even so, it's time to go back to the mission at hand. This time, it's a Booster Forest. Bamboo Pandemonium stage. Bamboo stage opens up with this blocky, almost pseudo-temple-like aesthetic, with overgrown trees and weeds breaking through the structures. When you start the stage, you have this flock of birds that depart when you move. It's a really nice touch, and I think it adds so much life to these stages. As you continue to traverse forward, more birds can be seen, flapping away as if they can sense the coming battle. You'll see a few enemies in your path, even one sporting ride armor. But there's no reason to worry, as soon you'll run across your own pilotable armor. When you enter the ride armor, the soundtrack changes completely. What was once a slowly building song, with guitars and deep ambience, is now this full-throttle hype-as-hell song. This track is one of the best in the entire game, and I love how it's just the ride armor theme. It's not even short. It's not like a 20-second loop. It's a whole-ass song, and I love it. Hey, Yuko Komayama, we need a song for when the characters are piloting the ride armor. It doesn't need to go that hard. The stage continues with some smaller enemies to pummel, giving you a real power trip in your ride armor, while also showing you one of the smaller gimmicks of the stage. There are elevators that need to be attacked to shift its position. This is most useful for traversing and keeping your ride armor. Eventually, the game throws an entire army of enemies at you, constant waves of Mavericks stand in your way, even other Mavericks piloting ride armors, but they are powerless to you. There are sections with spiked treadmills requiring you to drop the ride armor and platform properly to keep it. Coming through the midway event door is an endless horde of enemy ride armors. But for us, this is trivial, as our ride armor makes quick work of them. The next section opens up with this gorgeous tree that comes into the stage from the foreground and ascends into the background, along with another elevator. This section has a pretty difficult jump, requiring you to leave your ride armor in order to reach one of X's armor parts. This can and will take plenty of tries. I know I don't always first try it, and I've played this game so many times I've lost count. We are given two paths to choose, one that can only be taken with the ride armor, and the other without. This next section is pretty hectic, with tons of spikes and enemies on either side. But through efficient platforming, we go through the next event door. This time though, instead of a wave of ride armors, it's Vile. I have to point out that most event doors have a chance for it to be Vile instead of the original event, meaning it's time to spar with the evil bastard. Unfortunately for him, if you kept your ride armor up until this point, he gets flattened. A nice bit of karmic justice for what he did to us in the first game. After leaving the event door, we come to this really cool fixed angle. This is the section where most people would abandon their ride armor, but if you have spike protection, or a specific weapon's attack, not that this is needed of course, it just makes it easier to keep your ride armor, while also snagging a stage secret. The last thing stopping us from entering the boss is a block puzzle. If you want to take your ride armor into the boss room, you will need to properly destroy each block so that you can make a good staircase. Making one mistake completely destroys your chances of bringing it in. Yes, you heard me right. You get to take this sick ride armor into a one-on-one boxing match with Bamboo Pandemonium, allowing you to make quick work of him. This stage is awesome by all accounts. I really do love running through this stage, and it's usually my first stop on each of my playthroughs. The music and aesthetic of the stage cannot be ignored. Along with that, Bamboo is just a fun boss. With the third Maverick dished out, it's back to base. The navigators are still confused as to what the Maverick's MO is. There is no clear cut and dry plan being discerned still, even after putting 3 Mavericks into the dirt. All the while, they are still trying to diagnose why the next generation Reploids are going Maverick. Despite all the tests that have been conducted, it seems that the next generation Reploids' antivirus programs are absolute. There is no possible way they could be going Maverick. Axel chimes in, mentioning that he is a prototype next-gen Reploid as well, and confirms that he is also immune to viruses. The navigators decide, as a precaution, to analyze his data. Since Axel is a prototype, maybe there's a difference between his antivirus abilities and the finished production line of next-generation Reploids. While that is underway, next we go to Pitch Black, Dark Mantis' stage. This stage is quite a drastic change of pace from the other stages we've seen. It's a stealth level, yeah. They actually were trying something quite different with this one. Visually, the stage is, well, dark. And I mean dark. It's a pretty bleak military base. The aesthetic here is pretty bare, even for the X series. It's not overly colorful, it's muted with so many grays. It's an impressive atmosphere, and I like it. You constantly feel like you are under surveillance. Nothing immensely has changed with the gameplay, but part of the stage's gimmick is not getting caught by spotlights. Getting caught attracts a large amount of unwanted attention. In the very beginning, getting caught isn't much of a problem. Just a few MAVERICK come to attack. The opening section does require you to platform around lasers, leading into a vent with spinning fans that need to be timed to avoid. Though, Axel's dodges make quick work of this. Next is a short descending elevator section, but you must use blocks on the elevator to avoid lasers on whichever side they are coming from. Soon we drop into a corridor with a few enemies before an event door. There is another wave-based challenge against several MAVERICK. Pretty easy, since they can't really hurt you. After we leave this event room, we go to the next section and level where we need to avoid spotlights, or we will get caught. There are a few Mavericks in the way that will need to be dispatched of before you can get a really good method past them. There is an optional generator that you can reach if you have Axel and manage to clone one of the Reploids, you can actually get security access into the generator room. And if you happen to have Gigavolt Manowar's weapon, you can use it to power the facility, turning off all the security systems, meaning you no longer have to contend with the stealth mechanic. This is really cool. I really wish there were more things like this in the game. So, we need to continue to avoid detection while hopping over lasers and defeating enemies. This section doesn't give you a lot of wiggle room for mistakes, so you need to be pretty well positioned or you'll be detected. Afterwards, we arrive to another event door, where a series of Mavericks begin coming out of the door to try and stop us. The room can only have so many Mavericks in it at a time, and they'll even do this really silly run animation if they manage to escape. Next up is an exit into an elevator section. It's much of the same as the last one, only shorter. Then afterwards, there's this really cool section where you have to use the MAVERICK as a light source to have proper vision of the platforms, lest you fall into a pit and die instantly. But if you destroy it, well, you're out of luck unless of course you die. This transitioned us into another elevator section. 2 security Mavericks stand guarding the entrance, but they're no trouble. I haven't really mentioned the music, but that's because the stage doesn't really have any. It's this really subtle ambient track with sirens, but it doesn't get too complex, which is fine. It really does help set the mood for a stealth stage. If you were to get caught in, let's say, the spotlights, the entire stage lights up, flashing red as Mavericks begin storming in. The music shifts to a chaotic and fast track. Although it's short and a pretty simple loop, it helps illustrate the urgency of the situation. It really does give off those caught red-handed vibes. The main track of the stage is honestly really neat, and it's pretty unique in comparison to most stage music. It's really out of left field for an X game, which are known for their high energy and breakneck pace tracks. I know some people are definitely not a fan of this stage's theme, but I think it sets the mood perfectly. With that, the stage is said and done. It's back to the Hunter's base of operations. This time though, a lead is found with the Navigator's research. Next-generation Reploids are immune to viruses. There is no question about it. This is because the copy chip has the ability to completely change a Reploid's DNA. After the data from Axel, Alia was able to differentiate what is going on with the next-generation Reploids. The copy chips in fact shared extremely similar data to Sigma. As for what this fully entails is not known to anyone. However, there are still more Mavericks to take down, and more data still needs to be processed. But for now, all they can hope is their worst fears don't come to fruition. But in the Hunter's eyes, they are already suspecting that it's Sigma behind everything. Up next, the Hunters go to Troya Base, Optic Sunflower Stage. As I mentioned in the video, this base functioned as a facility for training Maverick Hunters. So what does the stage have going on? What is its gimmick? Well, it's a stage about trials with some platforming in between. It's all essentially tests that result in a score bonus at the end of the level. Overall, it's a pretty weird stage, but I like what it was going for. The entire stage has this really futuristic vibe to it, all this energy flowing around in the building, like floating data grids and giant beams with floating shapes and illogical architecture. The music is pretty chill, if not that developed, but it is nice to listen to. When you enter a trial, the music changes and it's a lot more upbeat while still incorporating elements from the stage's theme. Most of this stage can be summed up as its trials, and that's for a good reason. In between each of them is a very small platforming section, just to help you get from one place to another. They don't really serve a purpose. The first trial is dealing with waves of MAVERICK in various patterns. Now, get ready for me to say MAVERICK a lot, because this is the only enemy on this stage. Not literally, but it might as well be. You need to destroy as many as you can within the time limit. The more you destroy, the better your score. It's simple. The next trial is one that revolves around defeating a single MAVERICK. In this section where you're constantly falling, it's extremely easy and can be taken out quite fast, especially if you have the right arsenal. The trial after is another like the last one, except this one requires you to jump to moving platforms and avoid falling to your death while trying to kill the target. This MAVERICK can TP around, making it a little annoying to catch. The next trial is 2 MAVERICK that need to be destroyed while platforming, around a series of giant cogs spinning in different directions. These MAVERICK will dip below the stage and come up like a game of whack-a-mole. Only their destination is random in how they rise and what side. Afterwards is a trial with a giant MAVERICK that needs to be destroyed as fast as possible. The more damage dealt, the faster and smaller the MAVERICK becomes, shooting more and more projectiles. Once that is dealt with, we get to a real platforming section outside of the trials. This one caught me up as a kid, but now I know just to cling to the wall while mashing dash. This stage does feature some of the more hair-raising platforming sections in the game that do still trip me up, but that'll be mentioned a bit later. For now, we move on to the next trial, which, you guessed it, another MAVERICK that needs to be killed as soon as possible. Only difference is this one is forklift certified, and a giant spike wall is coming to kill you. With that annoying cretin out of the way, we continue through a pretty lenient platforming section, up into the next trial, where at least in this playthrough wasn't a trial at all. In fact, it's vile. Normally, 2 combat Reploids would appear here as their trial's challenge, requiring them to be destroyed within a desired time. But if you're contending with Vile by chance here, then you won't be timed. You're simply given the task of surviving. Next is one of the hardest platforming sequences in the game, if you're stupid like me. There are these pretty tight jumps, with spikes on several platforms, that require well-timed dashes. It's short, but for someone like me, I always find myself mistiming my dash and barely getting clipped by a series of spikes I'm trying to dash over. But after a few burned retry chips, we make it to the last trial, a MAVERICK piloting a weird dragon-like mechanoid. This one is not on a time limit either. You are just being tasked with surviving. At the end, we receive our medals for how well we played out the trial. If you are a perfectionist and you best rank all of the trials, you'll receive a bunch of goodies and actually get a secret boss fight against Cutman from Megaman 1. This threw me in for a loop when I saw it for the first time, and I didn't really understand why this happened. But you're not really supposed to think about it. It's that sort of thing. It's just a fun and cute Easter egg for performing extremely well. It has no bearing on the overall plot or the X series. Progressing after to the boss stores, we've come face to face with Optic Sunflower, and we end the stage. This level is pretty tedious on repeat playthroughs, and personally, I don't really like it as much as I used to. Having to also 100% the game and redo this stage several times because of one single mistake is also extremely frustrating. Not only do you lose score when not doing well, if you were to die in between trials, your score also gets diminished. So, did you want that exclusive rare medal in the stage, but you died near the end? Well, too bad. Do the whole stage again, buddy. It's also just an odd stage for me, because I'm not quite sure how Optic Sunflower really connects to something visually like Choya Base. But sure, why not? The abundance and variance of MAVERICK is cute and fun though, and I will give it props for that. The variety of trials though? The trials are really bare bones. Do X things as fast as possible. It's basically just a bunch of break the targets, but if the targets could also kill you. Truth be told, not a stage I like playing. To be even more truthful, well, with Cutman and Optic Sunflower out of the picture, we take our 5th boss Maverick down and return to base. X details his suspicions about Sigma being involved in all of this from the very beginning. Ever since he saw Vile, he felt that somehow Sigma would be connected to this, and totally not for the fact that Sigma has turned out to be the big baddie in every game. No, not ever. But without anything being clear, there is no true telling if Sigma is actually involved in the current plot with Lumine, only a hunch to go off with the copy chips. Someone is pulling the strings behind the scenes. Who they are is yet to be seen, but X would call his bets that it's Sigma. Alien X discussed his encounter with the Reploids, who cloned into Sigma, whether or not replication might result in them going Maverick. But Alia reiterates that by design, next-generation Reploids can't go Maverick. X understands that all he can do now is continue to fight against Mavericks, and maybe in time, something more will be found. On to Metal Valley, Earth Rock Trilobite stage. Metal Valley is a mining quarry that is used to harvest materials for space development. There are tons of construction and mining Reploids all over, including a giant mining mechanoid that has gone Maverick that will chase you for pretty much the entirety of the stage. I see a lot of people complain about the stage and its gimmick, and I can completely see why. It does kind of force you to play at the pace the game wants you to, and the stage feels undercut for it existing. But I think it's an okay gimmick, at least on the first run or two. Even for me though, I find myself getting tired of playing the stage because of the mechanoid chase sections. I mentioned a tiny bit earlier that the stage is pretty undercut, and that in itself is an understatement. The stage is extremely bare bones. and is just a few obstacles with some enemies being thrown in your way. Though most of them can be quickly avoided. Besides, the giant mechanoid will just crush them anyway. It's not worth your time to really stop and fight. Now that's unless you're someone like Screaming Yoshi. They are absolutely insane. I'll go back to talking about the stage in a bit, but I just want to let this play. He makes the game look so much cooler than I ever could with my recordings. I'll leave a link to his video in the description as well, if you wish to check out his other content. He does some really cool stuff. Now back to talking about Meadow Valley. There's nothing that really helps this level stand out beyond the other contenders in the roster. This stage realistically has 2 unique enemies, and that's if you count the giant gimmick mechanoid. Eventually, after what feels like forever running from him, we are led to a dead end with a crane. The only way to damage the enemy here is by activating the crane via lever by attacking, causing a crane to crash into its head, all the while dodging its massive attacks. After a few hits on the head, the mechanoid will run away, giving you the free time to comb through the pretty barren stage. Now, you'd think that while you're getting the secrets, that the mechanoid would be far gone, and that, my good friend, is where you're wrong. The mechanoid needs to be walked all the way back to the beginning of the stage in a reverse chase. This does, however, give you the opportunity to farm infinite medals by attacking it, which I totally didn't use to help me buy all my upgrades in my last playthrough. But once you finally backtrack to the beginning of the stage, the mechanoid will jump away and you'll go through an event door. This one is pretty unique in that you need to platform around crystals that keep being summoned and shifting around the room. Turns out, Earthrock Trilobite has quite some range, and can even attack you when you're not in his boss room. I wish this was more developed and didn't just get shoveled into a single event door, but I'm assuming the stage is already as low quality as it is because of lack of time. I didn't really mention the music, but that's because it's a pretty middling track in the game. I can't even remember it until I play the stage, and in all honesty, it's never stuck out to me. But there is a different track for chasing down the mechanoid, though it's still not that interesting. After the event door, we are met with the rampaging mechanoid we chased off earlier. This time, we need to do the gimmick again, with hitting levers to crash its head. This fight is pretty bland, and not even that difficult once you understand that he can't really hit you. But the perspective shifting does make it hard to tell where exactly his swing is going. After a lackluster gimmick mini-boss with a lackluster stage, we fight a lackluster boss, and it's cleared. Finally, I dread playing through this stage, but ironically, it's not even the worst stage to replay in the game. I'd rather replay this tenfold compared to... well, you'll find out. Now that Meadow Valley is cleared, we are thankfully back home. Lair congratulates X on his work out in the field, and mentioning how Zero seems depressed. X informs Lair about how Zero has been used to create a virus and to destroy the world at a different time. Sigma's potential involvement is hanging over everyone's heads, especially Zero's. If Sigma does happen to be involved, all the hunters can hope for is to take care of him for good this time. With that conversation over, it's on to the second to last stage of the main 8 stages. Time for Primrose, Gravity Antonian stage. This stage starts right off the bat with a banger track that is one of my personal favorites from the entire game, along with a series of cool visuals and an immediate introduction to the stage's gimmick. There are chambers with several buttons, usually along the walls, allowing you to rotate and flip the stage for easier traversal. The game slowly increases the complexity of the stage flipping, while also functioning as a tutorial throughout, adding blocks to show that they too will flip and be reoriented when a button is pressed, how enemies can be destroyed by these blocks, so you should be careful about finding yourself between them. There are these really fun sections to soar through that are basically a staircase with a series of enemies. They are small, but enjoyable. The stage's gravity flip mechanic feels so well done, and it doesn't break the gameplay at all when rotating the stage. It keeps you active and on the move. Soon, we encounter the mid-stage event door, where this time you need to platform around a series of blocks that keep going up and down, with a spike pointing in the direction of their movement. This is a genuinely claustrophobic section that tripped me up for years on countless replays. Only in recent times am I able to effectively bob and weave through the rising and descending blocks efficiently. It's an anxiety-inducing section, to be frank, and I don't really like dealing with it on replays. But it's not too terribly long, so it doesn't take away from the stage immensely. There's also the possibility that this RNGs into a vile fight instead. Afterwards, we return to the gravity flipping gimmick with even more complex room layouts, with many more blocks in the equation. Continuing on, there are these rooms absolutely littered with spikes, along the ceilings and would-be ceilings. with cube platforms that follow a set pattern, that have buttons on their sides, requiring you to adjust your platforming on the fly, depending on the rotation of the room, not forgetting to mention the enemies that are dispersed around. It can make it pretty hectic, but in the end, we find the boss door and take the fight to Gravity Antonian. After some hard jams and a crushed bug, we arrive back to the Hunter's base of operations. The navigators talk among each other and worry of what is to come, if these Mavericks may not even be the last ones to come out of the woodworks, if maybe something catastrophic might happen soon with the elevator. Axel snaps everyone to their senses and gets them to focus on the job, which is to assist in the hunting of Mavericks, getting everyone prepped to take out the last detected Maverick, which good for them, and not good for me because we're going to Central White. Yay. Central White is Avalanche Yetis. Stage. And it sure is something. It's a fucking on-rails bike section. Central White is a stage revolving around using the bike and destroying oncoming enemies, and properly driving without falling into pits, or driving face first into a wall. This stage is extremely boring. It wasn't even fun on the first playthrough. I genuinely hate this stage. I genuinely do not like this stage. The aesthetic is... well, what can you expect? It's called Central White. Everything is covered in snow or ice. The entire level is just white. Whiter than a Tex-Mex restaurant. But even still, the stage gets worse. Eventually, you encounter the stage's reoccurring mini-boss. This mechanoid will drop enemies and bombs onto you. You'll need to avoid them and get in shots when you can. This also takes way, and I mean way longer than it should. But once you've successfully damaged it enough, it's time for an even longer and more difficult bike section. This one subjects you to more instances of sudden death, along with a pointless optional section. It's nice, but it doesn't do anything. The only collectibles the stage has is at the very end, when you're off the bike. So why even add this? Maybe the devs realized how repetitive this mission was and just wanted to add something to break the monotony. Speaking of monotony, it's time for that second encounter with the mini-boss. This time, it will slide across the ground to try and kill you, along with throwing enemies and shooting projectiles. Overall, it's a time-consuming mini-boss on a level that just feels like a waste of time. I hate it, and it's just not fun to play. But at least, despite all of that, the stage does have decent music, but it does drag on after a while. But after crashing our bike into an ice wall, we breach through and find Avalanche Yeti. After giving him an electric massage, we defrost and leave the worst stage in the game. Thank God. I'm not trying to exaggerate here, and I feel bad for even really having to point that out. But I, and 99% of people, also just hate this stage with all of our heart. It's the absolute weakest part of X8 for me. I never want to play this stage again. Well, at least it's all uphill from here. After the defeat of the 8 Mavericks, X and everyone else believes firmly that Sigma is involved. Confused about where he is and why he hasn't reared his head in, Aelia adds that things are going to be different this time, mentioning that they're not being controlled, but they're all him. Though their data makeup is different, they're all functionally Sigma. Before Aelia can iterate further, a transmission is sent to the Hunters. The Hunters stare in shock as the transmission came from Sigma himself. Sigma announcing that all space development of the Earth is under his control, that his future lies in the sky, and the old world has outlived its purpose. Sigma declares all he is merely doing is ushering evolution along its natural path, and the transmission cuts. Aelia connects the pieces that space development and next-generation Reploids go hand in hand. They're both interconnected with their development, so it makes sense that these are major pieces in Sigma's plan. Aelia managed to trace Sigma's signal, as it was cut via the orbit of a satellite near the orbital elevator. The Hunters embark to JAKOB to ascend into space and track down Sigma to end this once and for all. Now, before we continue talking about the events of the story, I want to save the latter section of the game as an unstopped finale. These next sections should be very quick to the punch, so don't worry about leaving the main plot to hang. But for now, we're going to be talking about things I haven't been able to bring up yet in this video. I want to talk about stage secrets, collectibles, that sort of thing. One of the reasons I see people complain about in X8 is the sheer amount of them that are in the game. How often you'll need to replay stages just to 100% everything. That's not even including metal grinding. But the way I see it, and how the game was designed, you weren't intended to 100% all the upgrades. The game was designed with the intent to be replayed, but you can see that with things like the New Game Plus feature, which lets you continue playing with all your currently unlocked gear, just from the very beginning. Heck, some things can't even be acquired unless you beat the game under certain conditions. Do I feel like X8's collectibles are a little much? Maybe, but I think it adds a lot to the game's replayability. If you treat the game in the sense that you need to 100% all of the characters before beating the game, I can imagine that will drag and ruin the experience. But if you just play and spend your medals as you go, only buying what you want, I think that makes the overall experience less annoying. A large portion of collectibles are hidden behind or requiring certain characters, whether that's needing Axel's copy ability, Zero's weapons, or even X's armor. You can't get every collectible on every stage on a one swipe, usually in part because you lack the proper tool to grab it, or you need to come back with a different hunter. This is in part why I wish the game let you just tag along all 3 hunters, or, at the very least, let the player collect X's armor part when he's not on the mission. There is a point to be made against having all 3 hunters being playable at the same time, and I've already made that point earlier in the video, so I won't reiterate. I do agree that the collectibles should have been tuned down a bit, but I will also have to concede that it does add a lot of replayability to the game. I've already given my say on stage replayability when discussing in detail about Maverick stages. Several stages in this game have absolutely terrible replayability, and I won't reiterate further. After defeating every boss, the team gets their corresponding ability, technique, or weapon. The boss weapons in this game range from pretty cool to downright confusing. Let's start with Shadowrunner on X. This ability kind of just sucks to use. It has edge case uses, but aside from that, it has no unique functionality, outside of being a boss weakness. Green Spinner has its uses in being a giant bomb that can easily blow things up. Shining Ray is almost fucking useless, unless of course you charge it up, in which case it's alright, but it's still not the best for clearing the screen. I will say it's definitely unique in how it sucks. Squeeze Bomb is a giant black hole that travels along and can do some really good clear, also absorbing enemy projectiles. Crystal Wall is... it's like trying to trap a wild tiger, but you're using like a toilet paper wall. It's not going to work. This just summons a near useless crystal that blocks an enemy. If you could use it to platform off of it, sure, maybe it would be cool. It might have a few niche uses, but this just blows. The only use this weapon genuinely has is for stage secrets, as the powered up version can bring up items from below, which outside of scripted areas is usually a random health or energy refill. Drift Diamond is functionally really great. It has a good spread and freezes enemies, which is really strong in this game. Charging it even lets you get a freezing shield around you, having double purpose. Melt Creeper is... well, it melt creeps. It's just a fire trail, and when you power it up, it shoots another fire trail. It's pretty boring, slow and not effective. Thunder Dancer has the bonus of being a high damage move that can paralyze enemies, and its powered up version, well, it exists. So far, X's weapons have been pretty mediocre to lackluster. But, I mean, what can we really expect at this point? Boss weapons have always been hit or miss, no matter the iteration of the X game, or even the series. So this in truth is just par for the course. Axel gets his hands on some pretty unique options in his repertoire this time around. Unlike in his first appearance in X7, he actually gets a full list of 8 weapons. Green Spinner is this overpowered grenade launcher. Shining Ray is a high DPS ray gun. Shadowrunner actually becomes good. Squeeze Bomb becomes this piercing magnum shot that instantly breaks enemy guards. Crystal Wall is instead Bound Blaster, which is a ricocheting shot that can easily cover a lot of space. Thunder Dancer is now Plasma Gun, which is just Thunder Dancer but from a gun. And Ice Gatling is a more concentrated and more broken version of Drift Diamond. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, Melt Creeper becomes a war crime. Flame Burner. Jeez, how long did it take to come up with that? It's just a flamethrower, and while it's pretty cool, its range is pretty terrible. Overall, Axel's weapons are just stronger than X's. Zero's techniques stand out a lot in this game. I've already talked about in immense detail with his weapons, so I won't go over it again. But his techniques are all, for the most part, pretty useful and fun to use. Green Spinner will be Yodontatsu, which is a piercing stab that breaks guards. Extremely useful and fast. Shining Ray is Tenshoha, a giant solar beam like optic sunflowers. Shadowrunner becomes Ratsetsusen, a fantastic move that lets Zero do damage in the air and in a large space. Squeeze Bomb is substituted for Juhazan, a strong but slow technique that does heavy damage. Crystal Wall is just a flat upgrade to Zero's weapon, the Rekyudan, changing his weapon's color to orange and giving him the ability to deflect projectiles naturally. Gigabolt Manowar gives Zero Raikosen, this powerful lightning attack that has a variety of uses. Drift Diamond becomes Hyoryosho, a rising spin move that freezes everything in its path, and its opposite in Kujin from Burn Rooster, a downward attacking move that burns everything in its path. Overall, the Hunter's weapons are nice in this game. I think Axel actually has a repertoire, and Zero's are the best they've ever been. As for X, his weapons are, and to be brutally honest, bad. He doesn't get a lot of tools you'd be going out of your way to use. They are all just sort of there. But I think that's more in part because X's armor makes him so strong you don't need weapons. And now for the moment I've been waiting for, the final half of the game. It's time to go on a ride on the orbital elevator. Holy, and pardon my language, shit. This level is the most hype in the game, and not only that, it has one of the best tracks in the series. This stage is effectively a gauntlet of enemies constantly coming to you in waves. It's so unbelievably fun just getting to fight so many different Mavericks. Each floor is segmented by an ascent with waves of mostly aerial enemies in the way. Each stop is ambushed by hordes of ground-based Mavericks. The stage gets more and more fun, the more you learn to efficiently clear out enemies. It's just a blast to crush everything in your way, and the music is the cherry on top. I love the JAKOB elevator theme. It has the perfect Megaman X energy to it. As you continue to ascend, the sky goes dark as you exit Earth's atmosphere. More and more waves of enemies are thrown your way, and their strength only continues to grow. Upon reaching the top, you are warned of an enemy signal quickly approaching. That enemy signal is revealed to be none other than Vile. Vile yet again taunts the Hunters, reminding them that everything humanity needed to go into space now belongs to them. And this begins a skirmish against Vile atop the orbital elevator. I haven't gotten the chance to talk about it yet, so I'll do so now. Vile's theme goes so hard. I love it so much. His music perfectly encapsulates him as a character, and I can't get enough of it. Sorry, getting a little excited. Now, I want to mention that what's so different about this Vile fight compared to the random encounters with him on stages. Namely, his roster of weapons is far larger. His normal cannon shots are still there, along with his rapid movements. But now he has access to his knee cannon, the ability to summon enemies, and turning himself into a conduit of electricity. This attack is probably his most deadly, especially if you don't have a method to iframe through it. You have to dodge each of these lightning bolts as they rotate. This Vile fight is so fun. Fighting against a reoccurring series rival at the top of a space elevator, with the moon in the background, it's so awesome. When Vile is finally defeated, he transports away, heavily wounded. Genuinely, in my eyes, a perfect stage with an extremely fun boss fight. The Hunters depart from the elevator, trying to continue to trace leads on where Sigma is. Zero laments about how Vile and Sigma are all back in the picture, and how it's just like the old days. Blair asks if all of this reminds him of the virus. Zero utters his frustration towards Lair, asking for her to aid him in putting an end to this for good. A signal was found at a supply relay point in space near the elevator. The hunters have only a single hunch to go off of, but they can't take any chances. They transport into Gateway. This space station actually seems to house next-generation Reploids, who are fulfilling as substitutes of the 8 Mavericks from the mainline game. This of course means it's the boss refight stage. Gateway has some transfixing music to it. The entire aesthetic of the stage is like some gravesite, with what looks like a giant pipe organ in the center, connecting all of the transport pads. Each of these lead to a boss corresponding to their appropriate color. There isn't really much to say about this other than it's like every other boss refight section. The plus side is, after every encounter, there is a full HP and energy refill sitting on the ground outside. These fights are fun to do. And to be fair, I used to replay this stage a lot, because fighting the Mavericks in this game was so much fun. After dispatching all the copy Mavericks, Gateway begins to self-destruct. While you're not on a time limit, you are ushered to leave as fast as possible. The floor also begins to collapse beneath you as you approach the entrance. Coming back to where the mission started, a surprise attack comes from Sigma. Sigma reveals that him and his next-generation Reploids have full control of the moon, and their plans are reaching the final stage, iterating again that what he is doing along with the next generation of Reploids is merely to evolve past humanity, to abandon their old world and leave it to rot. This super fast and jamming song comes on as Sigma quickly glides across the room with his sword, launching slow bouncing projectiles and doing broad sword swings, eventually even covering the entire floor in a deadly fire as he continues to fight on. Every so often, charging a very powerful blast that requires him to be guard broken to stop. Of course, during that charge, like with all guards, he can't be damaged until it's broken. This fight can be pretty difficult if you don't use his weakness, plus it's way more cool not to. But Sigma goes down after a heavy battle, revealing in his dying moments to simply be a copy, a next-generation Reploid, merely mimicking Sigma. The hunters quickly retreat back to base. Aelia reveals that she's getting massive Maverick signals on the moon's surface. The hunters realize that there is nowhere else Sigma could be but on the moon. X leads the charge for the assault on the moon, Sigma's palace. The hunters get ready and set out for their final battle. The moon opens up in a desolate section with craters. The background is filled with almost Greek-like temple architecture, starkly contrasted by the void of space. Hordes of Mavericks stand in the way. The navigator's radio signal has been lost, leaving the hunters on their own. Blocking the path to the door into the fortress is a battalion of Mavericks. This section is pretty short, but the music here is fantastic. It sets the tone and the finality of this stage so well. The final mission to finally get back at Sigma, in the place of humanity's dreams, space. After wading through the hordes of Mavericks, the hunters pass through the door, revealing an isolated and empty right armor. Quickly flying down and landing on the armor's shoulder is Vile. Vile decides to just have some fun, torture the hunters one last time before it's over, maybe even finally exact his revenge against X and Zero. This fight is more akin to his random encounters, but this time with the gimmick of a ride armor helping him dish out pain. This ride armor has a series of extremely deadly blows and combos, requiring its guard to be cracked before Vile can be damaged, constantly hopping back onto it after a few moments, requiring the ride armor to be broken again. This fight isn't too in-depth, especially if you've already fought the mini-bosses and the actual encounter we had on JAKOB, but it is a neat gimmick. Once Vile goes down, he explodes and leaves nothing after a large blast. The hunters stop and speak to each other for a moment.
Don't get lonely, Vile. Your boss will be joining you in the scrap heap soon enough.
We did it! Let's go, Zero. What?
This is one of the interesting things about hard mode. This entire sequence doesn't happen unless you're on hard. Whichever hunter you had selected when Vile was defeated will be the one to carry on the torch and try to see this to the end. This is pretty awesome. It honestly wouldn't be so impactful if the character swap mechanic didn't exist. In this case, Zero is the lone survivor, as he watched his comrades get blown presumably to pieces, leaving it up in the air if they are still alive. But who knows, maybe they'll hide themselves so they can repair. Continuing forward, Zero comes face to face with dozens of Reploids, all of which are turning into Sigma. The next section is the hardest platforming and enemies in the game. Constant waves of Sigma clones, with an unrelenting amount of spike walls, giving very little wiggle room for mistakes. This section was always so hard for me growing up. I could always mess up at least one or two of these jumps, resulting in a sudden faceplant to spikes or a fall to the void. But after dispatching the countless waves of Sigma copies, we arrive upon the throne room of the real Sigma. A Reploid who looks more like a virus than a solid being. His entire body is crumbling and degrading, barely able to hold itself together. Personally, this is my favorite Sigma design, and I'm just going to shut up and let this cutscene play out.
Zero. Who could have imagined that we'd cross paths at the end of the world? The moment your virus entered my system, the seed had been planted. That's when it all began. The destruction of the world.
Heard about enough of this garbage, Sigma.
Don't get angry, Zero. I'm actually indebted to you. That my children are able to create this magnificent new world in space.
Children?
That's right. The new generation Reploids born of the JAKOB project all bear copy chips containing my personal data. Now the end of the world and of you has come. Farewell! Bring it on!
Now takes place a very difficult showdown with the big man himself. Sporting a massive HP bar, it's time to duke it out. Sigma's strength easily overpowers the single hunter, grabbing Zero by the head and attempting to crush him. This is when the other hunters step in and save him, Sigma exclaiming himself as the ruler of the new world, and that they are all powerless in what's to come. Now, I know a lot is happening, but I want to try and talk about what I can before moving on. Throughout these conversations, it's dropped that yes, the copy chips all bear Sigma's DNA. In a literal sense, these Reploids are Sigma's offspring. With that in mind, they all possess immense power. Sigma was behind the next generation Reploids tampering. Sigma's theme here also is just chef's kiss. It's truly wonderful, and for the final Sigma theme in the series, it's so peak. The raw aggression in this track is just astounding, and the track really does give the weight of this is it. As I said earlier, this fight is pretty difficult. Sigma has these projectiles that you need to dash through, these like hula hoop lasers. They all can come out pretty fast in a wide variety of patterns, even spinning at times. Along with those, he comes with a move similar to the copy Sigma fight, only amped up to be far stronger. His sword is larger, and his attacks are a lot more fanatic, covering the entire room in swings, cleaving you apart and dealing massive damage. He even took a move from Virgil and uses something like a Helmbreaker with a trick up, doing it in quick succession. You don't get a single frame to even rest. If you aren't immediately moving, you're already going to get hit by his next attack. During his other moves, he'll start charging his Doom Buster. Like Copy Sigma, if this is not broken, a massive damage wave will be unleashed. And during this charge, he can't be damaged until his guard is broken. Keep in mind, he can still very much attack and kill you, even while charging this move. His laser reappears in this fight, this time covering a wall of the stage temporarily, instead of on the floor permanently. This fight is unforgivingly difficult, and will likely eat up a few of your energy tanks or even your chips on the first pass. But when you deliver the final blow to Sigma, he gives his dying words, angrily stuttering, trying to rage at the hunters for destroying him yet again, ultimately not being able to form coherent sentences before being destroyed completely.
Impossible! How could you? You couldn't destroy the old world! New age!
Oh, Lumine. Are you okay?
Am I okay? Of course. Now that you've defeated Sigma, I suppose you're satisfied. Thanks to you, the plan has gone smoothly.
But Lumine, weren't you just used by Sigma?
Used? I don't think so. You see, he merely helped my plan along. The new generation Reploids have been awakened, and the new world is at hand.
Now this is still kind of crazy to me, even after all these years. This is the first game in the series where Sigma isn't the final boss, which has always just been a tradition for the series. This time around, Sigma was the tool, and someone else was the manipulator. Lumine deploys the power of all the 8 next generation Mavericks throughout the game, using their overdrive attacks to aid him in combat. Like Burn Rooster's flaming pillars to Bamboo's instant kill attack, these come out in tandem, raining snowflakes from Avalanche Yeti, while slashing at you with Dark Mantis's attacks. These can all be pretty difficult to avoid, and Lumine's health bar is just as gigantic as Sigma's. After landing a great blow on Lumine, we are cut to another dialogue with him and the Hunters. X is standing there in confusion, asking if Lumine has gone Maverick too. Lumine pities the concept, asking X if he even really believes that to be the case. He isn't Maverick, it is merely the ability to choose his own destiny. This is all because of the copy chip that bears Sigma's DNA within each and every next generation Reploid. Lumine's decision, along with all the other Reploids, was made with full consciousness. They have the ability to go Maverick on their own volition. In a very real sense, they are like X, Reploids with infinite potential and the ability to choose their destiny. X stands in defeat, barely able to focus on the situation. X realizing that perhaps him and all other Reploids are destined to be scrapped, and all that he has been opposing this entire time, the entire war against Mavericks, was simply the evolutionary steps of Reploids. That maybe Sigma was never truly evil. Sigma just longed to advance his kind. Humanity's concept of justice was preventing that. Maybe in the end, X and all Maverick Hunters were truly the ones in the wrong. Axel fires a shot into Lumine before he can try to destroy them, reminding X that Lumine is the enemy and that he should not listen to him, snapping X back into reality, giving him the conviction to take down Lumine. The Hunters take aim and prepare to take down the final Maverick in the way of peace. This right here is the best way an X game could close out, especially as the series finale. The Hunters stand against the supposed evolution of their kind. This fight kicks so much ass. I love it so much. Not only does it kick ass, the music does too. If you had to ask me what my favorite track in the X series was, I'd tell you straight up that it was Lumine's second phase theme. This song encapsulates the climactic situation the Hunters are in, fighting a being of immeasurable power who was able to use Sigma as a puppet for his plans. Not only that, the final battle in a long-running series of games. I remember seeing this for the first time as a kid, and my jaw dropped. I was in complete awe of this scene. Lumine's attacks are absolutely insane as well, from massive barrages of lasers to rings and lines of projectiles that grow and retract, requiring you to play a short memory game to dodge them. Lumine also has a constantly reappearing bubble that protects him from damage. This is different from Guard, in that you just need to take it down before you can do actual damage, and there's no instant way to break it. Lumine's attacks can get lethal extremely fast. If you are not careful, you'll be dead before you know it. Before this fight closes out, Lumine has another trick up his sleeve, his ultimate attack. This attack slowly darkens the stage as Lumine shields himself from all attacks, requiring you, as the player, to break his guard multiple times in order to deal damage. If the screen goes fully dark before you can defeat him, then you are met with instant death. This final sequence is so cool. The music changes into this orchestral track that builds with a divine sounding choir. Everything is on the line. If you aren't fast enough, you will die. And this is a perfect scenario to use the combo attack mode. This move will completely destroy him. And with that, Megaman X8 is beaten.
Unbelievable. You may have defeated me, but it's too late to stop what's already begun.
I'll take on plenty more like you if that's what it takes.
You really don't have a grasp of the situation, do you? Oh well. You'll find out soon enough.
Axel!
X! Status report.
This is X. Axel has taken damage, but he's fine. We're headed back now. Awakening. That's how Lumine described it. He said this was evolution. If he's right, then what are we doing?
If what Lumine said is right, then Sigma won't be coming back. Maybe this means I won't have to fight anymore. I bet you've been thinking about what Lumine was saying a while ago. Well, don't let it get to you. Just becoming Sigma could hardly be called evolution. Anyway, X. Even if we Reploids are destined to join the scrap heap when that evolutionary step does come about, we still have to fight, not only against Mavericks, but against our own destiny as well.
The story concludes with the fate of Axel left completely unknown. X and Zero have to contend with their own inevitable destiny, but perhaps there is a chance that Sigma is finally dead and buried. Maybe the war on Mavericks is finally over. But in the years to come, despite the recalling and scrapping of Reploids with copy chips, after the incident with Lumine, they would eventually return to being in production, despite all the warnings from the past. Humanity still desired space. As such, next-generation Reploids were a necessity. And so copy chips, along with them, were produced once again. The game hangs on a quote left behind by Dr. Thomas Light: "Humans and robots living together in harmony and equality. That was my ultimate wish." This is where the game ends off, on a complete cliffhanger. We have no idea what lies ahead, because after nearly 20 years, there is still not another X game. In fact, by the time this video drops, X8 will have just had its 19th anniversary. That's insane to me. There is Command Mission, sure, but that's an RPG set in an alternate universe. There is no closure for this series, and that itself is one of the worst things in this game. Thanks, Capcom. And that's X8. But what comes next after beating the game? Well, there's a slew of post-game content available to you. You can 100% each and every hunter, which if you beat the game with them in your party at the time, you unlock their super forms. For X, it's the ultimate armor. See, I mentioned the 4th armor earlier. This is what I was talking about. It's effectively a hybrid between the Icarus and the Hermes set. But also, if you were just a god, like, holy shit. This combines different aspects from both armors, while granting a few unique ones as well, granting X the Nova Strike, a powerful dash that can one-shot almost everything in the game, along with the Shoryuken, a high-damage uppercut that's just fun to use. For 100% Zero, you get the Black Armor Zero, or as it's just known in-game as... I can't say question marks, so just imagine whatever you want there. Black Zero, as the community has come to call it, is an uber version of normal Zero. It doubles his attack power and his dash speed, but as part of the cost, he also takes way more damage. But being a glass cannon is never bad, unless of course you are bad. In that case, skill issue. Oh, and not to forget, Axel also is in the bunch with getting a super form. This time around, it's per community dub, White Axel. This is in my assumption what Axel's true next generation Reploid form would be. That's also just me going off of it mechanically too. Axel gains the ability to infinitely hover while shooting, and his ground dashes become much faster and longer. In addition, Axel can maintain copy form indefinitely, allowing you to, if you're a psychopath, play as a copied Reploid for a whole stage. Its color scheme also looks suspiciously like Lumine's. Considering what happened in the ending, it can be assumed that Lumine possibly infected Axel with his DNA. But this is purely speculatory, and there has never really been any official confirmation on this sort of thing. I mean, hell, we would have had official confirmation probably if we ever got a new game in the series. Along with all these super forms, there are unlockable characters as well. If you use the Navigator enough times in a run, you'll be able to purchase them as a playable character from the R&D lab, but only if you have the corresponding character at 100%. This does mean you will have to play with a Navigator. Not only that, it has to be for multiple stages at a time. But the cool thing is, you get to play as Alia, Lair, and Palette. Yeah, fuck you, Signas. You'll always be sitting on the sideline as the guy who congratulates me for knowing a stage like my backyard. Alia, Lair, and Palette are functionally just clones of X0 and Axel respectively. However, Alia does not get access to things like X's armor, and Palette doesn't get access to things like Axel's copy shot. Lair, on the other hand, does get access to all of Zero's weapons and techniques, just not the stats of his black armor form. They also have to additionally be powered up to 100%. They don't share any upgrades with the other hunters they correspond to, which, yeah, it sucks, but hey, it's something else for you to do. Plus, I think it's fun having a girls' night in pitch black. Even if you get them to 100% though, it's not like they have any unique bonuses or unlockables. That's just it. There were data mined files from the old PC version that revealed that Alia had a voice line for Shoryuken, but considering what we got in the finished title, it can be assumed they had a lot more planned. And when I say a lot more, I mean more. If you go to the cutting room floor for this game, you'll see tons of stuff. Even an unused enemy design, and several optional missions that just didn't make it into the game. There was even an unused voice line for both X and Alia, mentioning the Hadouken. Oh yeah, I guess while we're here, nearing the end, I might as well mention the optional content. If you've played enough X8, you'll eventually encounter the intermission stages. These are completely optional, endurance tests, purely put in to help you grind medals. Noah's Park has one where you're fighting endless waves of crabs and wheels while trying to get a higher score, which eventually becomes a hellscape that only the Hermes armor can survive. Troya Base has an optional mission. It takes you to the gateway, weirdly enough, but you're on a timer to see how fast you can wipe the floor with all 8 Mavericks. It's a really cool feature. Even stages like Avalanche Yetis and Burn Roosters comes with optional versions. Granted, Avalanche Yetis is the infinite bike ride, so I will not be subjecting myself to that, while Roosters is an infinite descent to see how long you can last. These stages exist as fun minigames to help you get medals, though by the time you get all of these, you'll likely have everything 100%, especially the boss rush one. But hey, they're here as an optional thing, and I quite like the built-in boss rush. And so, as we near the closing of this video, I want to give my personal feelings on X8 as a whole. For me, this is my absolute favorite game in the X series, and in all the spin-offs and alternative games in the Mega Man IP. I have to say, this one is pretty high up there. Along with just being in one of my top favorite games of all time, it's truly a gem, and I'd gladly play through all of it again and again. In fact, recording this video, I actually made sure I got all the footage I needed. I managed to beat the game like 4 times. It's just so crazy to me how much I love this game. X8 definitely gets things wrong, and it's far from perfect. Absolutely far from perfect. But for what it is, it's the, in my opinion, best X game in the entire series. The gameplay feel, story progression and build-up, the music, the enemy designs, the stages. They're almost all consistently fantastic. Every game has its flaws, and I know people like to give X8 a really bad eye, especially since it came after X7. Hell, some people refuse to even touch it because it came after that game. But I firmly believe that X8 is the best game in the series, along with just being a very solid game. It was getting the series back on track, finally going back to the series' roots and not trying to do some stupid shit like X7. And that leaves the question up in the air. Is there a chance for a comeback for the franchise? Short answer, no. Long answer, no. Just kidding. Personally, I don't really see a chance for this game series coming back. I mean, if all the other Mega Man related series are dormant, what chance does this one have? All we've ever been getting has just been collections and re-releases, which sure, that's great, but I remember buying my copies of the X Legacy collection and hope that with my money, it would show Capcom that people care. Well, considering how many years it's been, I think it's safe to say my hopes have been thoroughly dashed. But hey, who knows? Apparently, Rockman Tyson is something we should be looking forward to from Capcom. But who knows if that leak is still true? Only time will tell. Speaking of time, did you know that there's been a ton of fan-made games and entirely new concepts inspired by the X series? It's true. Currently in development right now is the X8 remake, which serves as an attempt to scale X8 down to a game visually and mechanically like the SNES series, with its own creative changes to make the game overall better. It turned Yeti Stage into an actual stage. So I'm psyched as hell to see where that project goes. In relation to other ongoing projects, there are the fan games like Innocent Impulse, and this one was impossible not to talk about. Corrupted. Everyone has been familiar with Corrupted since it was first talked about back in like 2008. I'm still waiting for it to come out, and I have full hope that it will. As for Innocent Impulse, I try to keep track of its updates and it's showing amazing progress. I genuinely can't wait to see what that game has to show. Also, I can't forget to mention X-Dive. I said there wasn't any X games after X8, and that isn't technically true. X-Dive has no continuation of X8's story and is in its own alternate universe of sorts, with all sorts of crazy stuff, like Blair in a wedding dress, Alia in a wedding dress. Yeah, X-Dive is a gacha game that died, and became a single-player sort of gacha game. Personally, I haven't played it, but I hear X-Dive Offline is really good, so maybe I'll dive into that. There are a few wholly unique games inspired by the X series out there too. Gravity Circuit was a pretty massive release for me this year, and is currently my personal contender for Game of the Year. It has perfect music, character design, stages, and gameplay. It's just an outright stellar experience, and it's absolutely worth the money. It was such a good game. And who knows, I might make a video about that sometime. Another game I've only heard about and not played was Protodroid Delta. This game is like if you took Megaman X8 but made it actually good. From all the gameplay I've seen, it actually looks really fluid and fun for being based around a concept that nearly killed a franchise. By the time this video goes up, I'll likely have already played Protodroid Delta and given it a good try. Here's hoping I enjoyed as much as I expect. I'll leave links to all the games detailed here in the description if you wish to go support these wonderful creators. Please do. Their work is all fantastic. With all of that out of the way, I think it's time to wrap this video up. Thank you all so much for everyone who stuck around until the end. I'm so glad I finally took a leap of faith and decided to make this a hobby. For me, it has been extremely fun. I love video editing and scripting. When I'm in the mood, you can't take me away from it. I can video edit all day and not notice any time has passed. I just get so lost in the creative juices that I forget the world around me. I get drowned in it. It's really a joy to be able to make this kind of thing, even if it's all just for me and maybe the 5 people who will see this. I don't care. I'm happy doing what I love. And this right here is what I love doing. So thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video. This is Lunar Perspective signing out. May the moon always shine for you. Hi, this is Luna in Post. I just wanted to mention, the track that is currently playing is commissioned by Duckley. I would appreciate it immensely if you gave him your support. Alright, bye!